Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. It was 11:07 p.m. on October 3rd when the call came in. I flipped on my vest mic and checked my gear one last time. I never took these checks lightly. 10 years on the force teaches you to respect every moment you step out alone. Tonight, I was working the midnight patrol in the Maple Grove subdivision of Fairfax County, Virginia, a cluster of tidy townhouses with trimmed hedges and squeaky gates. Crime here was rare, but I'd learned that rare didn't mean impossible. Dispatch crackled in. Unit 17, 911 neighbor disturbance, 456 Willow Creek Drive. Caller reports loud banging, someone screaming. Unknown if homeowner inside. Proceed with caution. That address sat 2 blocks from my cruiser's last relocation, so I hit the gas and turned on lights and siren for a few seconds to clear the narrow street. I cut the siren at the bend. This was residential, and sudden noise might spook whoever was inside more than help. I parked under a yellow street lamp that buzzed like old neon. The house at 456 had its front porch light off, but a dim glow came from living room curtains drawn tight. I stepped out, hand resting on my Tasser holster before swapping it to my Glock. The oak leaves rustled in the wind, and the quiet hiss of the HVAC unit whispered from the side yard. I called in. Unit 17, on scene, front door, no response yet. I pulled on latex gloves, clicked on my flashlight, and eased up the 3 concrete steps. The door was unlocked. That told me 2 possibilities. Whoever lived here was expecting company, or they'd left in a hurry and never secured it. I nudged the door open and slipped inside. My spotlight swept over a chewed-up welcome mat and a hallway strewn with kids' sneakers. The faint smell of spilled bleach lingered behind it. The living room was chaos. Couch cushions flipped face down, coffee table askew, half a picture frame cracked on the floor. I froze for a split second. Felt my pulse skip. Then I called, "Fairfax County Police, anyone here respond?" My voice echoed against walls painted pale gray. No voices answered, just distant hum from the upstairs floorboard near the bedroom door. I edged forward, flashlight beam tight in my hand. On the hardwood, I saw scuff marks. 2 parallel lines gouged into the wood, as if someone had been dragged. I followed them with my eyes toward an archway leading into the kitchen. My radio lit up. "Backup en route, ETA 2 minutes. I acknowledged with a clipped affirmative, but my shoulders tensed. 2 minutes felt like forever. I turned toward the staircase. At the top, a hallway lamp flickered on and off. Shadows danced against yellowed wallpaper. I called again, my own name even. "Officer Hayes, I've got a welfare check in progress. Please respond if you can hear me." Silence, then a low thump from the master bedroom behind me. Not a bang or a shout, but a muffled impact, like someone falling against bedposts. I shifted my weight, listening. The back door to the yard stood ajar. Cold air rushed in, carrying the tang of wet grass. I exited through the kitchen, scanning the fenced backyard by flashlight. A child's sandbox lay overturned, sand spilled across pavers. A broken cell phone sat on a lounge chair, screen cracked. I scooped it up, no recent calls, just a damaged screen showing someone's frantic finger movements. My heart pounded. I radioed, "Unit 17 to dispatch, found personal device in backyard." Subject unaccounted for. Send EMS and additional units. I crouched and examined muddy footprints leading around the corner of the house. They were erratic. One booted print followed by a scuff, then another print uphill toward the side door. I holstered my pistol, pulled out my taser, and advanced. Inside the side entrance, the basement door was neither locked nor latched. I nudged it open and clicked on the basement light. The bulb flickered. Boxes of holiday decorations formed narrow corridors. My flashlight caught a smear of red, paint, I hoped, along a cardboard box edge. I whispered under my breath, "Come on, come on." Then, from the ceiling joist above, a thin voice whispered my name. "Oh, Hayes." It sounded like the wind, but carried a malevolent tone. I froze, palm against my holster. My breath came shallow. I called in, voice steady despite my chest hammering. "This is Officer Hayes. I hear breathing in the basement. Please hurry." I stepped deeper, boots crunching packing peanuts underfoot. The narrow space pressed in, walls closing around me. My flashlight beam passed over tangled extension cords, old Halloween masks, faces frozen in silent screams. Then I saw her. A woman crouched in the corner, shoulders shaking. Her dark hair hung in wet tendrils over her pale face. She wore a stained nightgown, knees pressed tight to her chest. Eyes wide, she stared at me. I holstered the taser and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, you're safe now," I said softly. "I'm here to help." She didn't answer, only glanced past my shoulder. When I followed her gaze, nothing moved, but I felt eyes on me. Suddenly, the basement door creaked shut with authority. I stood abruptly, heart racing. The air felt thick, like wet wool. I reached for the knob, locked. I yanked with both hands. No give. I pulled my radio. "Need assistance in basement, door locked." My voice sounded small in the confined space. The woman whimpered at my side, fingers digging into her arms. Minutes crawled by. I pounded on the door, yanked on the lock, cursed under my breath. Finally, distant footsteps overhead and a soft click. The door swung inward, and two colleagues shone flashlights down at me. Relief washed over me in hot waves. I stepped out, guiding the woman into my arms as they escorted me up. We crossed the yard to my cruiser. I buckled her in the passenger side and ran back inside, sweeping the house one last time. Empty, except for that heavy silence, and the faint echo of my name still ringing in my ears. When I returned, I slid behind the wheel. The woman pressed her forehead to the window, breathing ragged but steady now. I radioed, "Victim in custody, suspect unknown. Medical en route." I watched Maple Grove recede in my headlights as I drove her to the hospital. But even as sirens faded behind us, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, had followed her out. And somewhere in that empty house, in the dead hush between rooms, I could still hear the soft whisper calling my name. As we pulled away from the house, headlights cutting through the darkness, I kept glancing in the rearview mirror at the empty windows of 456 Willow Creek Drive. Mara Donovan sat beside me, wrapped in a foil blanket, eyes wide but silent. I tried to offer calm words. "You're safe now. Help is coming." But my own voice betrayed a tremor I didn't know it had. The ride to Reston Community Hospital felt endless. Mara stared out the passenger side window as we crossed the Oak Ridge Bridge, the community lights reflecting off her tear-streaked face. I kept my hand on the door handle, ready to leap out if she bolted, but she didn't. When we pulled into the emergency bay, paramedics swarmed in, cutting the seatbelt straps and guiding her gently onto a gurney. She turned her head toward me and whispered, "They were watching me, through the walls." I nodded once, Mayfield, my field sergeant, arrived moments later, his flashlight bobbing behind him. "Hayes, good work," he said, voice low. "Medics have her. I'll take it from here." I gave him a brief nod, still processing the basement door slamming shut behind us, the eerie echo of my name bouncing off those damp concrete walls. Back at the station, I filled out the initial report. Subject rescued from basement. Possible foul play. No suspect in custody. The kitchen phone and Mara's cracked cell phone were entered as evidence. I noted muddy footprints in the backyard, scuff marks on the hardwood, torn picture frame, but I hesitated under comments. How do you explain hearing your own name whispered in a crawl space? I left that line blank. By 2 a.m., my shift officially ended, but sleep was out of the question. I swapped my uniform for a plain polo and drove home in silence. The roads were deserted, save for one lone jogger who startled at my cruiser's headlights. At home, I paced through the living room, poured a mug of black coffee, and sat at my kitchen table with the station's printouts. The photos, Mara's relief as she climbed out of that basement hatch, looked incongruous next to the digital scan of her smashed cell screen. I ran my fingers through my hair. On one hand, it was a textbook welfare check gone sideways. Locked basement, frightened civilian, swift rescue. On the other, nothing about the house made sense. No signs of forced entry, but the front door was unlocked. Mara insisted she hadn't let anyone in. The neighbors heard nothing before the banging. Yet the basement door closed itself, and when I reached for that knob, it wouldn't budge. A chill crawled down my spine as I recalled the feel of the cool metal latch under my palm, the oppressive silence once the door clicked shut. My radio call for backup had seemed to fade into the joist above me. For a moment, I truly believed something, or someone, was up there, holding us down. I finished my coffee and walked to my bedroom, seeking refuge in sleep. But as soon as my head hit the pillow, the basement's stale air returned all at once. I jerked upright, sweat beading on my forehead. In the darkness, I could almost hear a faint scratching, like nails dragging along wood. I lay back down, heart racing, and forced my eyes shut. The next day, I arrived early for paperwork and evidence cataloging. The lock on the basement door was harmless. A simple latch, unaltered when I tested it under daylight. I photographed it, tagged it, and moved on. During lunch, however, my radio crackled with a routine call. Unit 17, we have a suspicious package reported at 232 Ashford Terrace. I packed up the evidence and headed out, grateful for a distraction. Ashford Terrace was another quiet subdivision. The call turned out to be an unattended grocery bag left on a curb, false alarm. But as I drove back to the station, I passed 456 Willow Creek Drive. The curtains were drawn shut, front light still off. I slowed down, my cruiser's tires crunching gravel. For a moment, I thought I saw movement at the living room window, an outline shifting behind the fabric. I flicked on the spotlight. Nothing. Just the cracked sidewalk, the garage door stained with ivy. That night, I couldn't shake the image. I found myself driving by again at 11:07 p.m., the exact time of Mara's call. Windows down despite the chill air. The house sat in perfect, silent darkness. No sign of life. Yet something about the way the front stoop light faintly glowed. It felt like a heartbeat. On my third pass, I slowed so much my brake lights lit up the driveway. From somewhere inside, there was a thump, low and deliberate. I grabbed my radio, voice steady despite my racing pulse. Unit 17 in the field. Possible unauthorized activity at 456 Willow Creek Drive. I'm checking on it. Backup units were tied up, so I idled there, flashlight in one hand, weapon in the other. The thump came again. like heavy boots walking down the hall. I stepped out, heart pounding under my Kevlar vest. Moonlight slivered through gaps in the curtains. Through the center window, I could now make out the silhouette of a man, tall, with shoulders hunched, standing motionless in the living room. The shape shifted, as though watching me. My breath caught. I tapped the window with my gloved knuckles. "Fairfax County Police," I called. The silhouette receded behind the curtains. I waited for the figure to appear again, saw only a flicker of movement to the side. Then, as if pulled by a string, all the interior lights clicked off. The house went black. In that instant, I heard it. A soft whisper through the glass, muffled, but clear enough I felt my spine freeze. It sounded like my own voice. "Hayes." My hand shook on the flashlight switch. My phone buzzed, a text from dispatch. "Any update on Willow Creek?" I stared at the dim house, every instinct screaming to get back in my cruiser. I typed, "Negative. No sign of activity, standing by." But I knew that was a lie. That night, I drafted a supplemental report. Entry number 42. After initial rescue, I observed a potential suspect on scene several hours later. Silhouette seen, interior lights off, possible surveillance. I recommended a follow-up welfare check and motion sensor cameras. But deep down, I knew cameras wouldn't capture the whisper. I went home again, exhausted and uneasy. At 2:14 a.m., I awoke to my phone buzzing. A message thread from Mara. They're still inside the walls. I hear them when the wind blows. I read it twice, heart pounding. I called her immediately. Line clicked to voicemail. No callback. Sleep escaped me. I lay on my couch, strobe of street lamp flashing through blinds, and watched the ceiling fan until dawn. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I was going back to Willow Creek Drive, alone if I had to find out what was hunting us. I grabbed my gear before shift, camera, flashlight, gloves, extra batteries, and added a small digital recorder. I slipped out just as the sky began to lighten, the first hint of pale blue behind the treetops. My cruiser's engine purred to life as I navigated back to the house. The street was deserted. I parked under the same yellow street lamp that still buzzed. The house looked unchanged, untouched, almost serene in the early light. I took a deep breath, my reflection wavering in the front door glass. I tapped on the recorder. Officer Hayes' supplemental narrative, October 5th, 6:45 a.m., second site inspection. No entries with warrant. Objective: install motion sensors, collect ambient audio, attempt contact with homeowner. I opened the door. The chaos from 2 nights ago was gone. Couch in place, picture frames realigned, floor swept. My flashlight beam settled on the bay window, curtains drawn but slightly parted in the middle, as though someone had peered out. My pulse jumped. I stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind me. No scuff marks on the hardwood, no muddy prints, only the faint smell of bleach. I walked through the living room, paused at the archway to the kitchen. My recorder in hand, I switched it on. Audio capture start. In the silence, I heard a soft thump overhead, like a footstep on a ceiling. I aimed my flashlight up the staircase. Each step looked pristine, unmarked. I climbed slowly, every muscle taut. At the top, the flickering lamp in the hallway was steady now, full brightness. I reached the master bedroom door and laid my palm on the cool wood. I called softly, "Homeowner?" "Officer Hayes, please respond." From behind the door came a scratching, light but rapid, like fingernails on drywall. Beam caught a glimpse of blue plastic, maybe a tarp or a bag. I kicked at it. It slid away, revealing the flaking corner of a metal box buried shallowly. I hefted the box out, rusted, dented, and pried it open with my knife. Inside, a battered leather journal, soaked through with something dark, and a single child's sock. My heart thumped. The sock was small. It must belong to the missing cat or maybe something worse. I snagged the journal and called up the stairs. I need hazmat and animal control down here now. Chen shook his head, voice low. Hayes, read that. I flipped open the soaked pages. The ink ran into blotches, but I made out words. They won't let me leave. I hear them crawl behind the drywall each night. I buried her under the sandbox. Her collar won't stop jangling. My palms went slick. That collar detail. Mara said she heard the cat at her door. Above, footsteps shuffled. Not my team. Something light, almost tentative. I dropped the journal and shone my light upward. The beam caught a dark mass perched on a floor joist, low and hunched like a child's frame. It clung to the wood, staring at me with gleaming eyes I could almost sense through the darkness. My breath hitched. It hissed, low and sorrowful. Hayes, Hayes. The boards creaked under its weight. Back up, I yelled. The creature let out a wet, rattling sigh as it dropped into the shadows and vanished. The basement erupted with the echo of heavy scuttling, something digging through the box piles gone from before. I fumbled for my radio. All units, extract me immediately. Then the trapdoor slammed shut. We all froze, not a malfunction. The latch snapped. Lopez banged from above. Hayes! The mic crackled. I yanked on the door. It wouldn't budge. My taser clicked empty. I cursed and shoved my Glock against the wood. Impact dented the surface, but the door held firm. The creature's chanting rasped from the dark corners. Why did you come back? Why did you come back? Chen snapped a photo of the latch for evidence. I rammed the door with my shoulder as the chanting grew louder, each why punctuating my skull. Then silence, like someone flipped a switch. The latch clicked and the door creaked open. I bolted upstairs, journal clutched in one hand, gun in the other, sweat and soil registering on my uniform. We spilled out into the kitchen. Chen's recorder had caught everything. Lopez dropped to one knee. What the hell was that? I bent over, chest tight, and gasped. I don't know. The basement lay calm again. The bizarre metal box and journal lay where I'd left them. We exited the house at a run and piled into the cruiser. As we peeled away, I looked back at the porch. Under the window where I'd seen the shape the third night, a single boot print had appeared in the flower bed. No slight scuff, but a deep imprint, as though someone stood there watching us leave. Back at the station, forensics swarmed the box and soil samples. The hazmat team warned me about possible toxins. In the lab, the soil tested positive for ancient clay deposits. Archaeologists noted it matched materials used in 19th century privies, not local to Fairfax County. Something had been brought here, buried, and left to fester. That night at home, I finally let myself collapse in bed, notebook and pile of printouts scattered on the floor. My last thought before slipping into uneasy half-sleep was the echo of that chant. Why did you come back? And somewhere, deep in the earth beneath that house, something waited for my answer. By the time I staggered through my front door, the gray dawn was bleeding through the blinds. My uniform was sodden with sweat and grime. I dropped my gear by the entryway and leaned against the wall, breathing shallow. Every muscle in me ached, and my heart still drummed that old question. Why did I come back? I peeled off my boots and slung them beside the door. In the kitchen, I poured 2 cups of coffee, black, and downed them both without stirring. My hands shook so badly, I almost spilled one on the counter. I rubbed my eyes, glanced at the stack of printouts I'd left there the night before. Crime scene photos, soil reports, the battered leather journal, all evidence of something beyond our training, something that didn't belong in Fairfax County. Sleep felt like a distant promise. I dialed dispatch and ordered overtime on the case file. I needed every resource. Backup teams, forensic analysts, building inspectors. They were going to reopen 456 Willow Creek Drive today. I needed them there. I had to be there. I changed out of my uniform into civilian clothes, a dark t-shirt, worn jeans, something low-key. I slipped the journal into my jacket pocket, the damp leather pressing against my ribs. I grabbed my flashlight and recorder, then locked the door behind me. The neighborhood was quiet, but I half expected to see that hunched shape at the window again. When I pulled into the station parking lot, the lot still held workers' cars from the overnight shift. I got the briefing room to myself and set the recorder on the table. I pressed play on the DVR footage Chen had captured, the whispering chant, the footage of that shape dropping from the joists the moment the trapdoor slammed. My stomach rolled as the voices whispered, "Why did you come back?" Each word stretched and warped. It was worse hearing it without the heat of adrenaline. Sergeant Mayfield stepped in, coffee in hand and concern on his face. "I saw the DVR. Son, we're reopening the whole scene, but no solo excursions. You understand, right?" I nodded slowly. "Yes, sir. I'll be with the team the rest of the way." He exhaled. "Good. We've arranged a code enforcement and structural engineers to meet us there in 2 hours. Forensics is coming too. We'll treat it like any other complex crime scene." He tapped the recorder. "And this," he looked grave, "we'll handle carefully. Tech will catalog it as possible psychological hazard." I swallowed. "Understood." I turned off the recorder and tucked it away. When we arrived at Willow Creek Drive, the entire block felt off. Cones and yellow tape cordoned off the property. A crew of code officers in hard hats were measuring the foundation. Forensics vans idled in the driveway. I felt a tug of relief mixing with dread. Finally, we would see the full extent of that basement. Finally, we would know what was really down there. The front door was locked, now secured by a padlock and evidence tag. I watched Lopez, face pale, eyes wary, cut the seal and twist the lock. The door swung open on silent hinges, revealing that same foyer, perfectly staged, no mess, no odor, just the faint tang of old bleach. I stepped inside, flashlight sweeping corners. Everything was too neat. It felt like walking into a dollhouse built on a crime scene. We descended the basement steps in a line. Lopez, forensic tech Simmons, me, then officers Chen and Alvarez bringing additional lighting. The trapdoor was flush against the frame. Simmons knelt and inspected the latch. No new paint, no jiggled wear, just the same old mechanism I'd forced open. He gave a curt nod. "All yours." I squared my shoulders. On my count, I lifted the door. Light flooded in, portable lamps buzzing, revealing the damp concrete and empty studs. No boxes, no cinder blocks, nothing left except a dusting of crumbly earth piled against the far wall. My pulse hammered. Simmons trained his camera while Chen laid out evidence markers, a half-buried metal box we'd left the night before, the weatherproof camera we'd affixed to the right joist, and then, on marker 3, a single child's sock folded carefully on the floor. Lopez crouched and dusted a fingerprint, but the sock was too soaked, too degraded. It would yield nothing but saltwater residue. I swept my beam across the walls. They looked raw now, no drywall, just open studs. I could see nails pockmarking the joists, and deeper gouges in the floor where something had been dragged. My skin crawled. Simmons beckoned me over with gloved hand. On the concrete slab lay a fresh etching. Words scored into the surface. You can't leave. My breath halted. The lettering was uneven, jagged, like a child's desperate carving. I knocked on the wall, hollow resonance. Behind that wall there was empty space. Crawl space? Otherwise, nothing. Alvarez clicked photos, and Simmons bagged a small concrete chip bearing the carving. I stepped back, wiping sweat from my brow. That etching hadn't been there last night. That meant whoever, or whatever, was still here after every cleanup. Then Chen's voice drew me back. "Watch this." He played the audio recorder. First, the hum of lamps switching on. Then a series of low thumps, like someone pacing overhead. Then, unmistakably, a soft, raspy breath right beside the mic. And then, in my own slow, weary voice, "I can't," cut off by a whisper, faint but icy clear. "Yes, you can." My stomach turned. That wasn't part of my recording. I jerked out my own recorder and cued playback. My scratchy voice overlapped with another. "You can. You always come back." It was layered, impossibly inhuman, as though 2 or 3 voices were speaking at once. We all stared at each other. Lopez cleared his throat. "We're done here. Get it sealed and get out." We filed up the stairs, emerging into the morning glare. The house stayed mute behind us, like it was holding its breath. The padlock clicked back into place, tape wrapped around the frame. We packed up gear in silence. Back at the station, I logged every piece of evidence. Soil, sock, concrete chip, journal pages, audio files. But none of that explained why the etching had appeared overnight, or how voices could embed themselves on recordings. All data, no answers. That evening, I sat alone in my car at a red light on Reston Parkway. My phone lay on the passenger seat, buzzing with unanswered texts from dispatch. I let it ring. My eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. For a second, the street behind me seemed darker, as though shadow pooled beneath the overpass. I shook my head and drove on, deciding to head home. I needed rest, rational thought, some semblance of normal. But as I turned onto my quiet street, I realized I was holding my breath. At the end of the block stood a single car, the cruiser I'd assigned to Willow Creek, headlights off, engine silent. It shouldn't have been there. I slowed to a crawl and felt my pulse spike. The cruiser's doors were closed, windows tinted, no one in sight. I rolled down my window and peered inside, empty. Then I noticed it. On the passenger seat, a small red child's sock, neatly folded. My mouth went dry. I reached for the door handle, but the car locked itself in a soft click. My radio crackled to life in my hand. I lifted it. Unit 17, Hayes, dispatch. Silence, then a whisper. "You can't leave." I dropped the radio, heart thudding so loud I thought it would burst. The sock gleamed on the seat, a single stitch of crimson in the darkness. I staggered back, fumbling for my keys. The engine roared when I pressed unlock, and headlights flashed on, blinding me. A figure rose in the driver's seat, tall, hunched, features obscured. I slammed the door shut and backed away, breathing ragged. The figure didn't move, just sat there watching me. The red sock tumbled onto the floorboard as the doors locked again. I fumbled for my radio. "Dispatch, this is Hayes. I need backup." But the line filled only with static. In that static, I heard my name, half gasped, half hissed. "Hayes." My vision blurred. I realized then that it didn't matter how far I ran or how many backup teams I called. That house, those walls, the voices, they had followed me home. And now, as I stood alone in the empty street, I knew I would never leave their reach. I never made it to my front door. Instead, I turned and ran down the sidewalk, away from the cruiser, away from the house at the end of Willow Creek Drive. Behind me, the engine died, lights cutting out like a heartbeat gone silent. The sock lay abandoned in the back seat, waiting for someone else to find it. And in the quiet that followed, I could still hear, just beneath the wind, the soft, unending whisper, "You can't leave." My lungs burned as I pounded down the sidewalk, each footstep echoing against the quiet houses. The memory of that lone red sock on the cruiser's seat haunted me with every breath. I didn't look back, I dared not, but I knew the house on Willow Creek was watching, waiting. When I finally reached the corner, I paused beneath a lamppost, hunched over like a man twice my age. My uniform shirt was plastered to my skin, but I wore civilian clothes now, a dark t-shirt that clung to me like a second skin. I checked my phone and saw 20 missed calls from Dispatch and Lopez. I swiped through voicemails, static, panicked tones. "Hayes, report in. Are you okay?" Each one made my chest tighten more. I dialed Lopez with shaking fingers. He answered on the second ring. "Hayes?" His voice was thick with worry. "Lopez, I can't go back," I said, voice strained. Whatever that thing is, it followed me out of that house. There was silence, and then he said gently, "Son, you need to come back to the station. We'll sort this out. We'll get you help." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "Help won't fix this." "Look," he said, "we'll pair you with a partner, throw a team at the house, get experts in paranormal or whatever if we have to. You're not alone in this." I swallowed. "I don't know how to be a cop anymore," I whispered. "I don't know what to call it." "Then stop calling it anything," he replied. "Just come in." I ended the call and slipped into a jog toward my cruiser. When I got there, I found the driver's door open. The sock from that night lay on the seat again, as if someone had placed it there deliberately. My heart crushed against my ribs. I pocketed it, locked the car, and drove to the station without siren or lights, too ashamed to announce my panic. The station was a fluorescent cave of hums and clicks. Lopez was waiting at the entrance, arms crossed in a doorway. His eyes were red-rimmed. He didn't say anything as I passed him and headed to the locker room. I hung my jacket and t-shirt on a hook, and then I found myself staring at my reflection in the small mirror by the sink. Dark circles under my eyes, unkempt stubble, hollow cheeks. I looked nothing like the cop I once was. Lopez appeared behind me, sliding a private's badge back onto my collar. "We've got a conference room set up," he said. "Sergeant Mayfield and the techs are there." I followed him, each step heavier than the last. Inside, Mayfield stood by a projection screen showing photos of that basement, the muddy footprints, the scrap of concrete with "You can't leave" carved across it. A forensic tech, Simmons, sat at a laptop, headphones hanging around his neck. Alvarez and Chen sat at the table, eyes tired. All of them were waiting. Mayfield spoke quietly, as though not to stir the room's tension. "We have motion sensor data from the cameras you installed," he said, pointing to the screen. The footage showed faint movements, nothing more than swaying shadows at first. Then a shape darting across the doorway at precisely 2:14 a.m. matching your phone buzz. Then he clicked again. The shadow merges with the walls and the frame goes black. I swallowed. That shadow, it looked human, but wrong. It moved like it could squeeze through cracks in the wood. Alvarez spoke up. "The soil sample from the basement, the ancient clay, you said the engineers never found that material nearby?" "I've talked to Soil and Geological," I replied. "This clay is from the Shenandoah region, millennia old. Not something you dig up for a sandbox." Mayfield nodded. "The journal said the previous occupant buried something under the sandbox. If that sandbox was on the property before your call, then someone dug it up moved it into the basement, and then rehearsed the haunting. Rehearsed? I echoed. Mocked, Simmons said, voice brittle. Someone staged every disturbance, the overturned cushions, the gouges, the journal entries, the recordings. They targeted you specifically. Your habits, your calls, they knew when you'd return. I felt bile rise. So, this is someone with intimate knowledge of the case and of me. Chen cleared her throat. We traced the GPS signal from your phone when you got that text. They never left. It pinged at your apartment, but also at the house. It was spoofed, but it came through local towers. Whoever's doing this is playing both ends. Lopez clenched his fists on the table. We need to flush them out, trap them. Mayfield nodded. We'll set a sting tonight, Hayes as bait. All eyes turned to me. I felt every shred of resolve vanish. I began, but they all shook their heads. No, Lopez said firmly. You volunteered for this job. We need you. I closed my eyes and took a breath. Okay, I whispered. They laid out a plan. I'd stay in plain clothes at a surveillance van 2 doors down. CCTV cameras would stream live to forensics. Lopez and Chen would hide inside the house, ready to spring out. Simmons and Alvarez would watch monitors and handle comms. Mayfield would coordinate from the station. By 10 p.m., we were in position. I sat in the surveillance van, the interior lit by pale monitors. My heart hammered so loud I could barely hear the team's radios clicking. I held the battered leather journal in my lap, the original from beneath the sandbox, its pages splayed open to the line. I buried her under the sandbox. Her collar won't stop jangling. I traced a fingertip along the damp leather. A clock on the dash read 10:07. At 10:14, my phone buzzed with a text. Why did you take her away? This time, it came from Caroline Griffin's number, the supposed homeowner. My phone displayed her name. I swallowed and packed the phone into my pocket. On the van's monitors, the empty living room flickered. The team's hidden cameras had live feeds. One in the kitchen, one at the trap door, one in the master bedroom. The quiet hum of the van's AC was the only sound. I keyed my mic. All units ready, Chen whispered. Ready. Lopez's voice was tense. Ready. Every monitor fed stillness. I glanced at the journal again. The last legible entry was dated October 2nd. They wait each night, drawn by the scent of fear. At 10:27, a soft thump echoed from the feed in the kitchen. Not the measured thumps from before, but slow, deliberate, like someone placing one foot in front of the other. My fingers tightened on the journal. At 10:28, another thump. Then the sound of scraping from the basement camera, followed by the creak of the trapdoor above. On the bedroom cam, the light switched on by itself, illuminating the neat dresser drawers. And then, at 10:29, on the living room cam, the front door opened, just a crack, though it was locked. A shape slipped in, hunched low. I leaned forward. Mayfield's voice crackled. Positions. Chen and Lopez moved inside, silently. The figure in the kitchen appeared as a tall silhouette, human white against the dim light, but shoulders too broad, limbs too long. It paused, then moved toward the basement doorway. On my monitor, I saw it half enter the basement, only arms and torso, then vanish. The basement feed went static. I slammed my fist onto the dash. Basement feed down, enters now, I shouted. Simmons yelled back for the AC to go silent, while Alvarez tapped commands at a keyboard. Suddenly, the static cleared. The basement camera feed was back, showing the damp concrete floor. But just for a second, the journal lay open in the corner, pages fluttering. Then the camera wobbled and cut again. Chen's voice was urgent. That's not ours. Lopez transmitted, "I'm moving in." On screen, I saw his silhouette pass through the kitchen cam, flashlight slicing the shadows, then up the stairs to the bedroom. The living room feed flickered as he approached the archway. At 10:31, the kitchen feed blinked back on. The figure stood in the middle of the doorway, unmoving. Then, slowly, motion sensors clicked as it raised one arm and pointed directly at the camera. A whisper crackled through the audio. "Hayes, Hayes." My own voice slowed and warped, as if pre-recorded. I froze. My blood turned cold. I knew that voice. On screen, Lopez burst into the basement, taser drawn, a flash, electric blue arc, and screams from the trapdoor camera. The feed cut. Chen cursed. "We lost him," Mayfield ordered. "Get that door open." I grabbed my radio. "I'm going in." I reached for the door handle of the van, but it wouldn't budge. Strange. The doors were locked from the outside. I yanked at the lever. Nothing. On the monitor, I watched as the basement light flickered back on. The camera showed Lopez on his back, taser in hand, breathing hard. He was alone. No figure. The basement floor was empty except for that notebook, lying open to a page I hadn't seen before. The words scrawled across the page in frantic letters, "He comes for you next." My heart slammed. I jammed the radio. "Hayes, to all units, give me that door." But static answered me. The van's interior lights flickered. Outside, I heard the softest footstep. I turned in my seat, no one there. Then another step, closer. The van's windows rattled. I opened my mouth to shout, but a whisper cut me off. "Why did you come back?" My skin went numb. I grabbed the door handle one last time and burst out of the van. The crew spilled out of the house at the same moment, Lopez leading with his weapon. He hailed me. "Hayes, get back." I stumbled forward, eyes wide. The house loomed silent, untouched. No flicker of movement in the windows, no whisper on the wind. Chen rushed to Lopez's side and they helped him up. He was scratched across his forearm, thin red lines like nails. He shook his head. "I saw him," he said, voice trembling. He was right there, tall, hunched, eyes glowing. I backed away, chest heaving. "We need to leave," I said, voice barely audible. Mayfield appeared behind us, eyes hard. "We can't," he said. "It's protocol. We secure the scene." I shook my head. "Protocol won't save us." He clicked his radio. "All units, code green. Evacuate non-essential personnel." As techs carried equipment out, I found myself unable to look at the house. Its dark windows seemed like empty eyes. I clutched the notebook to my chest. The final entry read, "If you read this, you're already here. We never left." I realized then that the haunting wasn't confined to that house. It was in the clay soil under my feet, in the battered journal I carried, in the scratches on Lopez's arm, and in the whisper chasing me down every dark street. That night, as we loaded into vehicles, I saw a figure standing on the porch. Pale and still, it stared at us. I drove past the house and it stood there as we passed, never blinking. Back at the station, I emptied my pockets, the sock, the journal, the concrete chip. I laid them on a desk in the evidence room. They had to go somewhere, but I knew they would never truly be contained. I took off my badge and set it beside the evidence. I couldn't wear it anymore, not as long as it was out there. I left the station on foot, heading for home under a sky that felt too quiet. At my door, I paused. My phone lay on the doorstep, screen cracked. I picked it up, no messages, no missed calls, but I felt the whisper in its circuits. "You can't leave." I dropped the phone and stepped inside. The lamp beside my bed had been knocked over. Its shade lay in the corner. On the wall, scrawled in fresh clay dust, were 2 words, "Welcome home." I backed away, heart thunderous. The door locked itself behind me with a soft click. I touched the wall, cool and damp, and felt clay under my fingers. I'm writing this now, on my dining room table, recorder running. I can feel it in the walls, in the corners of every room, in the hush between my breaths. I know I can't call for help. It won't come. I know I can't leave. They'll follow me. So I'll stay here in this apartment, listening to the walls as they shift. And if you ever hear a whisper in the dark calling your name, know this. It's already there, waiting for you. I still hear the hum of my radio in my ear as I pull up to the curb on Maple Street. The call came in just after 8. Concerned neighbor reporting possible welfare check at 1243 Maple. The dispatcher had said, "My name's Officer Lane, 30 months on the force in Springfield, Ohio, and I'd handled dozens of these well-being checks. A shut-in senior, a kid locked in by accident, the occasional false alarm. But nothing had ever felt as heavy as the silence that draped over that block. I killed the engine, shut the door, and let the hush of that autumn night close around me. The street lamps cast weak halos, and in between them the road vanished into shadows. My boots hit the pavement with a soft thud. Yellow leaves, damp from an afternoon rain, crunch underfoot. Across the way sits a row of half-built duplexes, gates swinging on broken hinges, and farther down, the squat brick building marked 1243. One window glows faintly, a solitary lamp burning in a living room that should have been empty. I draw my breath into my chest, steady it, call protocol first, approach, announcement, entry if needed. I slip the radio to my lips. Dispatch, Unit 42 on scene, beginning exterior check. My voice sounds tight in the silence. I step onto the property, noting footprints in the muddy grass, stomps that lead up to the front stoop, as if someone had hurried here, paused, then reversed course toward the back gate. The front door stands slightly ajar. I reach for my flashlight and grip my T-handle baton under my jacket. No backup on that channel. I'm solo until patrol can swing by. Fine. Protocol, knock and identify. I rap once, twice, and announce, "Police, open up, 1243 Maple." Nothing but the soft whistle of the wind. My reflection flickers in the glass panel beside the door. I push it wider. It creaks on ancient hinges. No lock. Inside, the carpet is worn, threadbare in places. Muddy prints matching those in the yard smeared near the door. Faint scent of stale air. I sweep my light left. Hallway leads toward the living room where that lamp glows. I step forward, scanning the walls for family photos. Anything that tells who lives here. Nothing. Bare drywall. I round the corner and see the lamp atop a small side table. Couch cushions are askew. On the coffee table, a coffee mug sits half empty, sweat beading on its surface despite the room's chill. Pictures haphazardly scattered. A woman's face in several frames, smiling confidently. A nameplate on the mantel reads, "Rachel Porter." There, a clue. I tap the mic. "Dispatch, I'm inside. Looks like Rachel Porter lives here. No sign of forced entry. I'm going to check the back." Silence, then a soft crackle. "Copy that. Unit 42. Proceed with caution." My hand rests on my service weapon as I move back through the foyer toward the kitchen. Cabinets closed, counters clear except for an overturned chair. A faint scuff mark on the tile. I head for the back door, a sliding glass unit smeared with fingerprints and muddy streaks. I glimpse movement beyond the glass. A pale silhouette darting past in the yard. My heart picks up pace. I ease the door open, flashlight trained on the overgrown lawn. A rusted swing set in the corner squeaks. Empty, swinging gently. To my right, A basement door sits open a crack, chipped paint revealing wood beneath. The hinge is loose, latch broken. I snap on my flashlight's high beam, illuminating 2 concrete steps descending into gloom. A sour smell drifts upward. Rot, damp earth, something chemical. I call, "Rachel? Police! If you're down there, make a sound." My voice echoes, swallowed by the vast emptiness. Nothing. I push off the threshold and take a step down, then another. The sound hits, slow, deliberate scraping, metal on concrete somewhere below. My chest tightens. Adrenaline floods my limbs. I grip the handrail and focus the light beam down deeper. At the bottom is a narrow hallway, walls lined with exposed pipes dripping water. Footprints in the dust, bare, as if someone moved around without shoes. They lead past a closed door, then end abruptly. I approach the closed door, hand on my holster in case of sudden movement. The door's warped. It rattles softly as air shifts. I press my ear to it, nothing but my own breathing. I tap twice. Metal clanks inside. Someone's locked in. I draw my radio again. "Dispatch, I've got a locked room at the end of the basement corridor. Requesting entry." Pause. "Copy, Unit 42. ETA backup 2 minutes." 2 minutes is a long time in a place like this. My light sweeps back up to the stairs, down to the door, across the narrow space. I notice a smear on the concrete floor, red-brown streak, crusted at the edges. I hold the beam steady. Smell tickles my nose. Not fresh blood, more like old rusted water mixed with earth. But even that is enough to set my jaw tight. My phone buzzes in my pocket. A text from dispatch confirming backup is en route, but still 10 minutes away. I swipe it off. Can't multitask. I crouch and shine the light under the door. Nothing but shadows. I grip the knob and twist. Locked. I lean in, ear to wood, concentrate. Movement beyond. Rhythmic shuffling. Faint breathing. I ease back, draw my sidearm, and check around for weapons. I find nothing. Cuff keys won't help. It's not a standard lock. I weigh options. Kick it open, look for a window. But there's no window, just that door and my flashlight. Outside, a car door slams. My patrol cruiser. The engine idles. My partner, Officer Diaz, steps out, eyes wide behind her glasses. She flicks on her own light and nods. Relief floods me, but I know better than to let it show. I lace my fingers around the baton's grip. "You see that door?" I whisper. She points at it, silent. We move in tandem now. She covers our rear as I take a running kick. The door buckles and splinters, the lock giving way. We rush inside as pieces of wood rain down. The hallway light blinks on. Bare bulb swinging from wiring, casting long, wavering shadows. We sweep left, empty. Sweep right, the locked room, door flung wide. Inside, dusty shelves, cardboard boxes knocked over, a single chair turned on its side, nothing else. I step in, scanning corners behind boxes. "Rachel?" I call. My voice cracks in the hollow space. No reply. My flashlight catches something on the far wall, writing scrawled deep into plaster, 4 uneven letters. "Help." I inch closer, fingertips brushing the jagged grooves. The scrawl is fresh, edges still crumbly. My stomach knots. Diaz flicks her light toward the back of the room. A small trapdoor lies in the floor, latch broken, crawled in mud around its edge. She glances at me, eyes flicking between the door and the writing. I nod grimly. Standard procedures out. We're beyond that now. I push the trapdoor up, rusted springs protest, but it lifts. A ladder descends into pure darkness. Something in me recoils, but duty pushes me forward. Before I climb down, I press my hand against the wood, steady myself. I whisper, more to myself than her, "You okay?" She exhales hard, sets her jaw, she nods. We move on our stomachs through the trap, boots scraping. Down below, earth and stone press in. Water drips steadily onto concrete. I swing the light. I swear shapes shift in the beam's edge. Boxes piled into columns, some collapsed. Broken frames, old clothes, a child's sock. How long had this place been in use? How many locked doors had I passed without noticing? Then something skitters away. A rat, a stray cat, or something worse. We freeze. My heart hammers. I grip my weapon tighter. I count off. 1 Mississippi, 2. Silence, then another skitter. Closer. I raise my flashlight higher, beam landing on a hatch in the opposite wall. A small window, dusty, but outside light seeps through. I approach, wipe the grime away with my sleeve. Through the thick glass I see nothing but darkness beyond. But I see movement, legs, crouched, huddled. Someone's out there. My breath catches. They move away before I can shout. I pivot, racing back to Diaz. She points behind me. Footprints lead away, back up the ladder. I follow, heart pounding so loud I fear it'll drown out everything else. We emerge into the room above with the writing. I spin, eyes flicking to the living room window, no glow now, empty, quiet. My radio crackles. Unit 42, backup on site. Status? I steady my voice. We found nothing. Subject missing, I'm clear. Beginning exterior search. Distant sirens wail. I climb out the back door, slam it shut. Leaves swirl in the yard. The wind has picked up. I look at the basement latch, broken. Walls bear more scratches like someone clawed at them inside. I shine my light on them. Deep grooves, some fresh, some old. I glance at Officer Diaz. She steps forward, kneels by the swing set, examining the grass. Her light finds small prints, doll shoe size, children's prints. No one under 10 lives here. The wind shifts again. We look at each other, swallowing. I reach for my mic. Dispatch, suspect, not sure who, left prints outside. Child-sized, no sign of victim. Silence crackles, then, copy, Unit 42. All units respond. I flick off the beam and look back at the house as red and blue lights wash its brick walls. In the windows, those lights dance like fireflies. I press my back to the patrol car, chest heaving, mind racing. Somewhere inside that shell of a house, Rachel Porter is waiting. Or maybe she's already gone. I don't know which is more terrifying, but until dawn, we'll search every inch of that place. Because in moments like these, the night isn't just black, it's hungry. And we're its prey. The floodlights from 3 additional cruisers cast long, distorted shadows across the lawn as Officer Diaz and I slipped back through the broken basement hatch. My heart pounded so hard, I thought it might burst through my chest. Every creak of the house, every distant drip of water sounded amplified in the night. Diaz followed close behind, her flashlight beam dancing over upended boxes and cobwebbed rafters. We'd agreed to keep voices low. The neighbors would be watching now that backup was on scene, and I didn't want to spook whoever, or whatever, was still inside. We climbed down into that damp cellar again, boots slipping on mud. The air tasted like mildew and something coppery, like old blood. I flicked my wrist to turn on the overhead work light someone had evidently dragged down here earlier, its bulb strobing and crackling. Under its harsh glare, the fingerprints on the walls looked fresher, glossier than before, as if scraped into the plaster only moments ago. I knelt and ran my gloved finger along one groove, careful not to disturb it. The letters were jagged, raw. Help. Beneath that, faint, almost erased, was another word. Me. The deeper I stared, the more convinced I became that someone, or something, was clawing at these walls to be heard. Diaz tapped my shoulder. and I looked up to see her flashlight trained on an overturned box. Its flaps were splayed wide, and inside lay a child's toy truck, half buried in dirt. I frowned. Rachel Porter was in her 30s. Why a toy here? I leaned closer and probed with the tip of my baton. The truck's paint was chipped, and around its wheels was a dark smear, moist. I shone my light on it, and saw that it wasn't just dirt. It was a dark sludge that glistened unnaturally in the beam. I swallowed, the hairs on my neck standing on end. Could be paint, I murmured, though I knew better. Paint didn't smell like iron, and why would someone hide a toy in a basement crawlspace? The toy's presence felt like a taunt, a breadcrumb dropped to unsettle. A sudden crash boomed from above, a cabinet door slamming shutter, something larger falling, followed by a sharp, anguished gasp. Diaz drew her weapon, and I did the same, instincts snapping into place. We exchanged a single, tense nod, then hustled up the ladder. Our boots pounded up the rungs, and I nearly lost my grip when the ladder shifted beneath me. At the top, I pushed myself through the trapdoor, yanking it closed behind us. The living room lamp had died again. The apartment was darker than before. My radio crackled to life. Unit 42, are you okay? Dispatch. Relief flooded me, but I tightened my grip on the grip of my pistol. We heard something loud, no visual yet, proceeding with caution. My partner, Diaz, swept the room with her light. One cushion on the couch sat upright now. Earlier, it had been tipped. The coffee table still held that half-empty mug, but the liquid had shifted, as if stirred. Ripples faintly catching the dim light from the hallway. Someone had been here, recently. We moved toward the hallway, voices hushed through clenched teeth. At the end of the hall, a narrow door led to the bathroom. The faint glow from the hallway bulb flickered as we passed the kitchen, its counters still bare. I paused by a framed photo of Rachel and her sister, smiling in front of a park gazebo. I glanced at Diaz. You think she was living here alone? She shook her head, eyes wide. I don't know. Phone records show only her name on the lease. We reached the bathroom door. I pressed my shoulder into it. It gave way with a tortured groan. Inside, tiles were cracked. One sink faucet bent down as if yanked. The mirror was splattered with something dark. Drips and smears that looked like rust, but too thick, too viscous. My pulse kicked up again. I stepped in, light probing corners. At my feet, footprints, adult shoe prints soaked, led to the bathtub and then up the side of the basin onto the windowsill. I crouched, shining the beam on each print. The treads matched my own boots, but smaller. Someone wearing my size. Maybe Officer Diaz? But her prints were clean. I checked her shoes, immaculate. A hollow rapping sound came from the bathtub, light, deliberate, like knuckles tapping porcelain. I backed away, pistol raised. My knees wobbled. Diaz edged past me and peered over the rim. Empty. No sign of movement, no victim curled in the tub. Just chipped tile and a dark stain where the water pooled. I flicked off the light and we crept out, every nerve screaming. Let's get everyone out, I whispered. We secure and wait until daybreak. Diaz nodded, her face pale in the gloom. We retraced our steps to the living room, passing the fireplace where the name Rachel had been scratched into the mantel earlier. Now, someone had scrawled another word beneath it. Sorry. The letters were smaller, more precise, as if written by someone who still had control of their fingers. I crouched and traced the grooves, no mistaking the intent. It was an apology. But for what? A phone rang, sharp, electronic, coming from the bedroom. We both froze. No external ringtone matched. This was a landline. Landlines don't ring like that. The sound echoed off walls, We exchanged horrified looks. Slowly, I reached for the door frame and eased myself into the bedroom. The phone on the nightstand glowed red. The handset cradle was broken. The phone rested askew. I raised the receiver. My glove squeaked and brought it to my ear. Silence. Then a faint breath. I held still, pulse in my throat. "Hello?" My voice trembled. Static crackled, then a whisper so soft I strained to hear. "Help! Please!" The line went dead. My ears rang. I dropped the receiver and it clattered to the carpet. Diaz gasped. I steadied myself against the wall. "Dispatch," I whispered into my mic, but my hand shook too badly to key the button. I held the radio close and croaked, "Get out here. Phone just rang basement level." Static swallowed me. No reply. Adrenaline and dread seethed through me. I stumbled back into the living room and flicked on my radio as best I could. "All units," I rasped. "Send medics and negotiators." Subject or victim making contact. Phone just rang in bedroom. Silence, then frantic replies crackling in. Backup converged on the scene. I collapsed into the couch, head in hands, adrenaline draining and disbelief washing over me. Across the room, the coffee mug bobbed faintly again, as if stirred by invisible fingers. I glanced toward the basement door, now solidly shut. Earlier, I could peer through the crack. Now it was sealed. My partner knelt beside me, voice low. "Lane, are you okay?" I lifted my head, eyes glassy. "No," I admitted. This isn't protocol, this is," I swallowed. "Something else." She patted my shoulder. Outside, more cars arrived, officers milling, flashlights probing windows. A detective called out from the yard, asking for our statement. I rose slowly, legs unsteady. Sweeping my jacket back, I holstered my weapon. Every instinct told me to run. Get away. Find, then end this madness. But I was sworn to serve. I owed Rachel and anyone out there that chance. I squared my shoulders and stepped into the hallway again, toward that bedroom where the phone lay dead. Just then, a soft sob came from behind me, quiet, choked. I spun and blinked into the dim light. On the stairs leading back to the basement, a small handprint glowed faintly, as if lit from within. No droplets of blood, no smeared mud, just a bare, perfect print, palm down, fingers splayed. It hovered on the riser, unaccompanied by any footprints. I swallowed so hard my throat clenched. The print faded as I stared, vanishing into the darkness. My radio crackled with urgency. Detective Hart here, heard a scream, on my way up. I flinched at the word scream. Nothing yet. The weight of the night pressed in. The basement door groaned behind me as if something on the other side pushed against it. I took one step toward it. The beam of my flashlight hit the handle. It rattled, slowly, deliberately, inch by inch, turning. I froze. My heart slammed against my ribs. I swallowed. And then the door swung inward on silent hinges, into pitch darkness. The basement door clicked fully open and swung inward on its own weight. My flashlight beam wavered as I stepped forward. Every muscle coiled. The air down here was colder than before, as if the house exhaled a breath of winter. Damp stone walls dripped steadily. Every drop sounded like a gunshot in the darkness. I heard Diaz's shallow intake of breath behind me, and somehow that small sound steadied me. I lifted the beam higher, tracing its arc over stacked crates and lengthening shadows. At the far end, where I'd last seen the rat, or whatever it was, there now stood a narrow passage I hadn't noticed before, its archway masked by hanging tarps and electrical cords. My boot scraped on gravel. I paused, listening. There was a faint thud, 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 like something tapping on concrete from within that hidden corridor. I keyed my mic. Unit 42 to all units. New passage discovered in basement, second tunnel. No sign of victim yet. My words echoed back through the speaker, hollow, swallowed by thick stone. No reply came, too much interference. I exhaled and motioned Diaz forward. She swept her light across the tarps. They were stained dark, as if touched by hands that bled onto the fabric. I ducked under the first tarp. My glove snagged on loose wiring. I winced. The tunnel beyond was low, barely tall enough to stand. The walls were carved with dozens of names, some legible, some faded. As I passed, my beam caught Morgan, underneath 2015, and, crooked and desperate, Sue with a date I couldn't make out. My pulse spiked. We're too late for some, I muttered. Diaz's light lingered on a name I recognized from dispatch files. Leah, 2009. Leah Matthews. The report mentioned a missing teen that case never solved. My breath hitched. A fresh breeze stirred, though there was no visible vent, cold air drifting out from the tunnel's depths. We advanced until the passage opened into a small chamber. In its center lay a cluster of objects. A battered radio, its dial turned to static, a smashed lantern with glass scattered, and a spiral-bound notebook, its cover waterlogged and pages curling. I stepped closer, mindful of loose stones underfoot. Picking up the notebook, I flicked it open. The pages were filled with frantic handwriting, partial sentences, crossed-out words, scratches. My eyes skimmed. They watch from the walls. Do you see their eyes? Can't sleep. The hum under the floorboards. Remember October. Hear the voice. The last page had only a single sentence, scrawled in heavy ink that pooled at the bottom. I am here. Beneath it a fingerprint, smudged but unmistakably feminine. I slipped the notebook into an evidence bag and sealed it. Diaz trained her light on the far wall, where faint footprints led to another opening, narrower still. I followed her gaze. Low rubble formed a barricade, but someone had wedged it aside. We squeezed through, emerging into another long corridor. This one felt older. Walls rough-hewn, no concrete, but carved rock. Arched ceilings pressed close overhead. The air hummed faintly, resonating in my chest. My flashlight beam played off dark stains on the floor, arranged almost in a pattern. Two parallel lines leading to an alcove where a single wooden chair sat. My boot heels clicked as I approached. On the chair lay a crumpled photograph. A family portrait of Rachel Porter with a small boy. Her nephew, according to records, smiling under bright sunlight. I flipped it over. On the back, someone had carved, "Time's running out." The hum swelled. I winced and covered my ears, but it only grew louder, like a chorus of distant voices chanting beneath the earth. My legs trembled. Diaz reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Lane," she whispered, "we need to get out." But I forced one more step forward. In the alcove beyond the chair, I saw movement, pale and swift, darting behind a broken pillar. I raised my voice. "Rachel, it's Officer Lane. If you're here, make a sound." Silence. Then a soft sob, so close I felt its vibration through the damp stone underfoot. My flashlight swung to the left, catching a slender figure crouched against the wall, hair matted, clothes torn, eyes wild. It took a step toward us. Rachel. But her face was gaunt, cheeks hollow. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came, only a ragged gasp. Instinctively, I holstered my pistol and crouched down. "Rachel, it's okay, we're here to get you out." She reached out, fingers trembling, and I offered my hand. Her grip was ice cold. She tried to stand, but wavered, head lolling. Behind her, the alcove's walls shifted in the beam. More carved names, fresh scratches leading both upward and deeper into the stone. She looked past me, eyes darting. I followed her gaze. The pillar receded into a vast chamber, an impossibly high cavern lit by a dull glow, though no light source was visible. My radio crackled. Unit 42 status. I swallowed. We've located Miss Porter. She's alive, but she's disoriented, need immediate extraction. No sooner had I spoken than the humming exploded into a keening wail. Rachel screamed, long and primal, echoing off rock walls. The cavern seemed to vibrate, the glow intensifying until shapes emerged from the shadows. Silhouettes of figures, human shapes, but distorted, emerging around the edges of our lights. They moved slowly, shuffling, their limbs unnaturally long. My blood ran cold. Diaz yelled, "Move now!" She grabbed my arm, pulling me and Rachel back toward the tunnel. The cavern's glow flickered, then dimmed, but the keening remained. I half carried Rachel, half supported her as we stumbled through the passage, the figures trailing behind like marionettes on a silent stage. A stale air rushed in to meet us as we neared the tunnel's entrance. I slammed my shoulder into the stone, releasing pressure, and we spilled back into the rough corridor. Behind us, the cavern mouth closed in on itself. Walls of stone sliding, sealing the chamber. I heard a final echoing thud. I paused, heart hammering, and slid Rachel's arm over my shoulder. We turned and ran, or I ran, carrying her, guided by the faint glow of my dying flashlight. Boots pounded against loose gravel. My breath came in rasping gasps. I didn't look back. At the first ladder, I hoisted Rachel up, then climbed myself. Every rung a promise of daylight. Above us, the basement hatch was ajar. I wrenched it open, dragging Rachel through and collapsing onto the cold floor. Diaz was already slamming it shut, her face streaked with dirt and fear. She wedged a piece of wood against the latch. We lay there, heaving, in the emptiness of the room where "sorry" was scrawled beneath Rachel. The lamp above flickered once, then died, plunging us into darkness. Through the floorboards came the low, distant hum, softer now, like a lullaby fading away. I pressed a trembling ear to the floor. No sound now, except our own breaths, ragged and urgent. I looked at Rachel's face, her eyes closed, chest rising and falling. Alive. But something had changed. Behind her closed lids, I knew she still saw that cavern. And so did I. I raised my radio and keyed it with a shaking finger. Dispatch, to secured. Evacuating immediately. Entire structure is compromised. As I spoke, the floor beneath me shifted ever so slightly. Just a tremor. Enough to remind me that whatever lived beneath Maple Street was still awake, watching, waiting. I ended the call and gathered Rachel in my arms. We stepped into the hallway, my pistol drawn again. The front door stood open, yellow streetlight bleeding in. I glanced back at the basement hatch. It was sealed tight, no sign of where that second tunnel had been. My pulse thundered in my ears. I carried Rachel outside into the fall mist as officers flooded the house. Red and blue lights painted her face. She stirred, opening her eyes to the flashing glare. Her voice was barely a whisper. "They're still down there." I wiped my forehead. "We'll send teams tomorrow," I told her, but I knew we wouldn't. Not tonight, not ever. Because something in that darkness had woken with us, and nothing would ever seal it away for good. We rolled Rachel onto the stretcher and into the ambulance, just as dawn began to wash the sky a steely gray. The cryo-blue lights spun overhead, strobes of urgent color against the pale morning. Inside, Rachel lay motionless, eyes half open, staring at nothing. Her fingers twitched on the gurney rail. I climbed in beside her, strapping myself into the passenger seat. Officer Diaz at the driver's wheel. The rear doors slid shut with a pneumatic hiss that sounded too final. I pressed my radio to my lips. Unit 42, en route. Victim secured, heading to Memorial Hospital. No signs of obvious injury, but subject is in shock. Advise psych team on arrival. Static crackled back, agents confirming. I turned and shone my flashlight through the window at the house. Maple Street, 1243, stood silent. A brick shell with boarded-up windows now catching wet light. No one lingered. Neighbors had melted away when the emergency crews arrived. It looked abandoned again, as if nothing had happened. Diaz struck out toward the hospital, tires humming over asphalt. I leaned over Rachel. "Morning, Rachel," I said softly, checking her pulse. It was steady, too steady for someone who'd been underground for God knows how long. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. "They... watching." Her voice cracked like glass. I squeezed her hand. "We're safe now." Her eyes flicked open fully, then clamped shut, tears sliding down her cheeks. We reached the emergency bay and transferred her to the waiting nurses. She vanished behind curtained walls, and I stepped back into the chill air. My uniform was spattered in mud and dust. I adjusted my belt, weighed down by the evidence bag with that notebook. I called dispatch again, filing my report. Unit 42 clear, returning to station. Subject transferred, scene secure. The voice on the other end was calm, routine. I set the bag on the rear bumper, kicked the tire, then climbed into the cruiser to follow Diaz back. At the station, I unloaded my gear into the evidence locker. The notebook went straight into a sealed box. I flicked the pages with gloves on. Notes about voices beneath the floorboards, names carved in stone. I stapled my own report to it, stamped confidential, and locked the locker. The station was empty now. My shift was done. I stepped outside onto the back loading dock. The wind rattled the overhead door. I paused, just a moment, listening. Silence, save for distant traffic. I started toward my car when I noticed footprints in the gravel beside the dock's ramp. Small prints, barefoot, child-sized, leading away from the open door. My heart jumped. Who had followed me here? There was no one around. I stepped carefully to the edge of the dock and shone my light over the side. The prints ended at a scuffed patch of grass, but there was no exit, only a brick wall. I knelt down. The soil was soft, pressed flat as though someone had knelt and then stepped away. I touched the ground. No debris, no clues. I straightened, uneasy. I climbed into my cruiser. The engine started on the first turn. I backed out and pointed the nose toward home. The drive was quiet. Every red light felt personal, every curve unfamiliar. I reached Maple Street again, but this time I didn't stop. I sped past 1243, its windows boarded, the front stoop empty. No yellow tape, no evidence markers, just a single light flickering inside, though the fixture was broken. Home felt miles away. I pulled into my driveway under an overcast sky. My house was modest, a 2-story frame with vinyl siding and a small front porch. I flicked off the cruiser lights and stepped out. My boots thudded on the concrete pad. I loaded my gear into the trunk and slammed it shut. As I turned to the front door, I spotted something on the welcome mat, a single muddy footprint. My size, bare, no sock, no shoe. How? My pulse raced. I bent and wiped at it with my glove. Nothing lifted. The mat lay flat. The print remained, etched into the fibers. I drew my flashlight and shone it from the side. The ridge of the print glowed faintly in the beam. No one else had my boot size. I swallowed hard. Inside, the air was stale, unchanged since I left. I flicked on lights, hallway, kitchen, living room. All normal. I set my bag on the coffee table, the same table where at 12:43 the toy truck had sat. I exhaled and sat on the couch, hands clasped around my coffee mug. Cold. I chugged the remainder, grimacing. A soft click came from the hallway. I jerked upright. The front door was ajar, wider than I'd left it. I hadn't closed it all the way? I checked the knob, locked. Whoever opened it somehow bypassed the latch. I rose, holstering my pistol. I stepped forward, each board creaking beneath me. The hallway stretched into darkness. I flicked my light up the stairs. No movement. I called, "Who's there?" My voice cracked. Only silence answered. I crept toward the door, sweeping the beam into the yard. Any shadow could be an intruder. My heart hammered like a riot drum. I leaned in and peered outside. The street was empty, trees swaying in the morning breeze. Nothing. No trace of Prince's disturbance, only the soft rustling of leaves. A chill crawled up my spine. I closed the door behind me, clicked the lock, and leaned my shoulder against it. My breath fogged in the stale air. I checked my watch, 7:13 a.m., way before my usual alarm. I rubbed my eyes. I told myself I was tired, jumpy, but I knew better. The phone on the coffee table buzzed. Not my cell, it was my desk phone, the old landline we still had for emergencies. It hadn't rung in years. I stared at it, hand hovering. The display flashed unknown caller. I picked it up. Static. Then the soft inhale of breath. My eye twitched. I raised the handset to my ear. "Officer Lane," I said, voice low. Silence, then a click, like a receiver being dropped. I set the phone down, chest heaving. My radio crackled faintly on my hip, an open channel, though I hadn't keyed it. I leaned in to listen. Through the static, a voice whispered, clear but distant, 10-4, Lane. We're watching." I spun, hand on the grip of my pistol. Nothing in the room moved, but the crawlspace door under my coffee table swung open on creaking hinges. I stared, darkness yawning beneath the floorboards. I swallowed. I hadn't reported that crawlspace. That entrance was sealed 2 years ago, after a flood. I never used it. And yet it was open now. The whisper came again, louder. "You can't hide." My radio died, my phone went dead. The television in the corner, black all evening, flicked onto static. And through those gray lines I thought I saw a face, pale, hollow-eyed, pressing against the glass. I reached for the remote and switched it off. It stayed lit. Then I saw something scrawl across the screen in old-school white text. "Help me." My body froze. I stood alone in my living room at dawn, a single, muddy footprint, and a phone call that never was, and something else. The feeling that no matter where I went or how far I drove, the darkness beneath the floor would follow. Because once you've seen the names on those walls, once you've heard the hum, you're never alone again. I left the house that morning without looking back. But when I reached my cruiser, the rear window was fogged from the inside, and on the glass, written in the condensation, was a single word, Lane. And I still don't know who wrote it. It's been nearly a month since Maple Street 1243 was boarded up. The case file sits sealed in Evidence Lockup 3 at the Springfield Police Department, stamped closed. But I haven't closed it in my mind. Every night I lie awake listening for that low hum, like distant radio static mixed with a child's sob. It started 2 nights ago, right after lights out. My bedroom fell silent. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., I heard it, soft, insistent, coming from beneath my floor. I froze, breath in my throat. My service revolver lay on the nightstand, untouched. I didn't move. Eventually the hum faded, as if whoever or whatever was there realized I was listening. My shift today began at 8 a.m. roll call. I sat in the briefing room as Captain Morales droned through the roster. Faces blurred past, voices droned, but my mind was fixed on a scuff mark I noticed on the station floor last week by the mop closet. It wasn't there when I started that day, and yet afterward it was. A single muddy footprint, child-sized, pointing at the wall. No one owned footprints that size. No one brought that kind of dirt inside. When I asked Sergeant Daniels about it, he shrugged and said they probably tracked it in during an evidence run, but the closet door hadn't been opened in weeks. After roll call, I drifted to my desk, hoping paperwork would anchor me back to normal. My case notes for Rachel Porter were organized in a locked computer folder, labeled 1243 Maple A. I opened it automatically, expecting reports, lab results, photos of that toy truck, the scrawled "sorry" on the mantel, the carving of "help" beneath it. I clicked through spreadsheets of footprints and tire tracks, witnessed statements from neighbors who swore they heard whispering or saw flickers of light in the basement window. Everything felt orderly, official. Even the evidence bag with the spiral notebook sat in the corner of my office, its pages safely tucked away behind glass. Whenever I looked at that notebook, my skin crawled, the names Morgan, Leah, Sue, carved into walls I'd never seen. At 10:15 a.m., I was halfway through writing my daily patrol report when the radio crackled. Unit 42. Respond to a welfare check at 341 East Elm. I swallowed, hand hovering over the keyboard. Elm Street was 8 blocks from Maple, but felt worlds away. I grabbed my jacket, holstered my service weapon, and stepped outside. The sun was high, birds chirped, kids in backpacks ambled by. Life on Elm was ordinary. Trimmed lawns, tidy porches, no boarded-up windows. In the back of my mind, I wondered if today's check would be another false alarm. An elderly woman locked in her bathroom. A teenager's phone died during a game. But as I climbed into the cruiser, I noticed something on the passenger floorboard. A small rubber ball, like the one from that trucker's toy decades ago. Its paint was chipped, and around its rim was the same dark sludge I'd seen on the toy truck at Maple. I froze. My pulse kicked up. I sank back into the seat, slid the ball into my pocket, and drove away without calling it in. Elm Street was quiet when I arrived. The caller, a young couple, said they found their neighbor's front door wide open and lights on, but no sign of her. I exited the cruiser, radioing in. Unit 42 on scene at 341 Elm. I'll check perimeter, then approach. Their house was a white clapboard bungalow with flower boxes under the windows. Inside, the living room lamp glowed, TV on mute. Footprints, barefoot, smaller than mine, trailed from the doorway toward the kitchen. I flicked on my flashlight. The beam caught a smear on the wall. Run, carved deep into the plaster. My jaw clenched. I cleared my throat. "Ma'am, sir, step outside for me." The couple huddled at the curb, eyes wide. "We thought we heard her scream," the woman whispered. "Then nothing." I nodded, radioing for backup, but kept my light trained on the dark hallway ahead. I moved in slow, measured steps. Adrenaline sharpened. At the far end, I saw the silhouette of someone crouched by the fridge. Hair long, matted, clothing torn. I raised my voice. "Officer Lane, Springfield PD. If you're okay, stand up." They didn't move. I clicked the beam higher. It caught 2 wide eyes reflecting back at me. When the figure turned, mouth opening to speak, I recognized the gaunt face. It wasn't my neighbor. It was Rachel Porter. Dirt streaked down her cheeks, clothes shredded. I wiped away a hair strand from her forehead. "Rachel," I said, "you're safe now. We're taking you home." But as I reached out, she vanished, dissolving into shadow so quickly I nearly fell backward. My radio shrieked. "Unit 42, status," they called. My hand shook as I tapped the mic. I have the subject. She's here in the kitchen." I turned to guide her out, but the hallway behind me was empty. The front door slammed shut, echoing through the house. I ran to it, locked. My flashlight flickered. I reached in my pocket and found only the rubber ball, warm in my palm. "No, Rachel, just the ball." I emptied my pocket, keys, badge, notebook pages, everything except her. I backed away, breathing hard. A scraping sound came from the ceiling, a chair dragged overhead, maybe the old attic floorboards. I spun my light upward. In the hatch above, it cracked open slowly. Beams of light fell into the room as the attic ladder folded down. My heart thundered. I grabbed my pistol, pointed it at the ladder. "Rachel? Is that you?" No answer, only the metallic creak of ladder rungs swinging free. Dust motes drifted. I called dispatch. "Need assistance. Possible trapped subject in attic at 341 Elm." Static. No acknowledgement. The station must be swamped. I climbed the ladder, each step groaning. At the top, the attic was cramped, sloped rafters overhead. Boxes lined the far wall, insulation spilling out. My light caught something black on the floor. More footprints, child-sized, muddied. They led into a tight corner where a small door sat flush with the wall. No knob, just a seam. I crouched and pressed my palm against it. It swung open, revealing a narrow crawl space. I shone my light in. I could just make out shapes in the gloom. Broken dolls, fragments of old photographs, and on the far wall, names scratched deep. Porter, Lane, Porter again. They were overlapping, as if carved one after the other by different hands. And then I saw the latest name, fresh and unwritten, Lane. My breath caught. I pressed forward until my chest touched the cold wood. Before I could see more, the crawlspace door slammed shut behind me with a crack that vibrated in my skull. I bolted upright in the cruiser, sweat cold on my forehead, engine idling. The radio whispered something I couldn't decipher. The digital clock glowed 11:46 p.m. I'd fallen asleep at my desk again. Marshals parked by my office door must have woken me. My uniform was rumpled, the cruiser's dome light still on. I restarted the engine, heart hammering. On the seat beside me sat the rubber ball. I didn't remember placing it there. I reached across, picked it up, and its surface pulsed in my hand, warm. I flicked it against my palm. It rolled away under the front seat and stopped on the floorboard. As I groped for it, I saw a new imprint on the dashboard glass. Tiny footprints, as if pressed from within. I exhaled slowly, hand freezing mid-reach. I closed my eyes, telling myself it was stress, fatigue, too many late shifts, too many odd calls. I turned the key and the engine died. The dome light flickered off. Outside, the world went black. I counted, 1 Mississippi, 2, but no engine turned over. My heart sped. I reached for the radio, dead. My phone buzzed, vibration against the console. I fumbled it out. A text from an unknown number. "You should come back." Beneath it, a photo. The station's evidence locker, doors ajar, case file, 1243 Maple, lying open on the shelf. And behind it, scrawled on the wall in fresh paint, "Welcome back, Lane." I slung the car door open and stepped into the night. The air was thick, still. No cars passed, no dogs barked. I stood under the street lamp and hatched a plan. Go back inside, Lock everything down, shred the file, burn it if I had to. But the station loomed ahead, its windows dark, the main doors locked. I crossed the lot. Every step felt like walking on eggshells. I reached the side door, secure keypad. My badge slid through the slot, unlocking it. Inside, the hallway was empty, but overhead lights flickered. A single door at the end stood open. Evidence lockup 3. My case file lay on the floor, pages scattered, photos of Rachel, the notebook, that ball, footprints. My name had been added to the ledger under missing. I could hear footsteps above, soft and deliberate, coming down the hall. I drew my weapon but didn't dare call out. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a whisper, so close I felt it on my collar. You never left. Behind me, the lock clicked. Footsteps approached. I spun, light darting across empty hall, heart rate spiking. No one there, just my own ragged breathing. I backed toward the door. The whisper came again. Stay with us. My pulse in my ears. I reached the exit keypad. Buttons worn smooth. I punched in the code, door unlocked. I stumbled outside, into the cold night, rain beginning to fall. I heard the locker door creak open behind me as if someone stepped out. My radio lit up, then crashed to static. My phone died. Lights in the station went out, leaving only the emergency exit sign flickering red. I ran to my cruiser, still parked under the lamppost. The dome light glowed faintly. I slid inside, slammed the door. The engine turned over immediately this time. I peeled out of the parking lot, brakes squealing. As I crossed the street, I glanced back. The station windows glowed briefly, then darkened again. On the evidence locker door, I saw a smear of wet paint. A single word, tall and bleeding, Porter. I haven't been back to the station since. I'm on sick leave, waiting to transfer. Every night I check under my bed for muddy footprints. Every morning I wipe down my windows and doors, but sometimes at exactly 2:17 a.m. the hum returns. Beneath my floor, from a place I can't see, I feel a soft tap, 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 like fingertips on wood. I tell myself they're just dreams, but I know better. The darkness didn't stay underground. It followed me. In the footprints on the dashboard, in the phone messages, in the station hall where no one walked. And now it's waiting at my house, at my door, whispering that I never closed the case, that I'll never close it. And whenever I stop listening, it will open the crawl space again. Because darkness isn't sealed by doors or boards or reports. It's sealed by the ones who hear its call and choose to come back. I was parked just past the last street lamp, engine humming low, waiting for the dispatch to confirm the 911 caller's location. The night air was thick with humidity, even out here in the Ohio suburbs. Cicadas hummed in the trees, and crickets clicked in the grass. A faint glow from my dashboard cast my reflection onto the windshield, and I caught the tired lines around my eyes. Shift had started 3 hours ago, and already I'd dealt with an unlocked car, a barking dog complaint, and a minor fender bender on Main Street. None of those had rattled me. This one would. The radio crackled. Unit 23, 911, caller reporting sounds behind the neighbor's house on Bramblewood. Suspect last seen 2 days ago. Caller says she heard banging and saw a shadow at her window. I keyed the microphone. Copy, dispatch, I'm en route. I flicked on the overheads and rolled down the window. The quiet was almost loud. No traffic, no distant sirens, just the nighttime chorus of insects. Bramblewood Drive was the sort of street where everyone knew each other by sight. Neat lawns, row upon row of ranch houses with matching shutters, and kids' bikes propped against porches. At one house inn, number 47, The porch light was dead, the blinds crooked. A single security camera blinked its slow red pulse. I parked 15 feet from the curb, left the cruiser running but gear in park, and slipped out with my flashlight in one hand, pistol secure in its holster. I crouched behind the front wheel and studied the house through my beam. The siding was vinyl, a dull cream color that took on a sickly hue under my light. There was no sign of a back-and-forth argument, no overturned chairs or broken planter pots, just a stillness that felt wrong. I clicked the mic. "Dispatch, I'm on scene. No sign of caller. I'm checking the perimeter." Stepping onto the grass, I felt the soft give of dew and thought about how easily the dew turned to ice in winter. I moved around to the side yard, staying low, using the wooden fence for cover. The neighbor's house next door had a gap where a slat was broken, wide enough to peek through. I crouched and shone my light into their backyard. The grass was overgrown, a lawn chair tipped on its side, and a small swing set creaked in the breeze. No figures. I straightened and closed the gap, listening. Something scraped against the wooden fence behind me. My heart ticked into high gear. I pivoted, sweeping the beam. Empty lawn, empty sidewalk. I kept my breathing steady. I had to remind myself not to raise my hands to my chest. That look of panic was a giveaway on a bad night in the academy. I let out a slow breath and continued toward the back gate. The latch was stiff. I pressed my weight against the gate and it groaned open. My flashlight cut a path through blackness thicker than I expected. The house's rear windows were roughed in with grime, making it impossible to see through. But I flicked the beam toward one window and caught movement. A silhouette curled on the floor, limbs folded unnaturally. When I blinked, it was gone. "Hello," I called, voice low and controlled. "Fairmont PD, I'm here to help. If there's someone hurt, come to the door." I got no answer, only the hum of my own radio lost inside the house. I dropped to one knee and pressed my ear to the window's cold glass. There was nothing but silence. I hustled forward and found the side door ajar. I nudged it open with my shoulder and slipped inside, scanning quickly. The foyer smelled of damp carpet and something metallic, like a fresh bruise. My light washed over a console table, scattered mail, and a set of keys by the front door. No shoes on the mat. No sign of struggle. I clicked on my duty belt camera and it whirred softly. These call recordings would be reviewed later. I needed clear evidence I'd followed protocol. I moved deeper toward the living room. The blinds were drawn tight, the curtains heavy. I flipped the light switch. Nothing. This house hadn't seen electricity in a while. My torch became my only guide. As I stepped forward, I noticed muddy footprints leading from the back door toward the hall. They were too large for a child, too small for most adult boots. I crouched and raised my gloved finger to one print, fresh, still damp. My chest tightened. I followed them, heels skirting the edge of the wall, toes pointed into the center. The hallway was narrow, lined with photographs in black frames. Couples on beach vacations, a little girl's graduation day, a man in uniform that wasn't mine. I edged to the first door. Bedroom. Inside, a twin bed lay disheveled, stuffed animals strewn across the floor. A small rocking horse stood in the corner, its paint chipped. I swept my light toward a desk where crayons and paper lay scattered. One sheet caught my eye. A crude drawing of a stick figure house with a dark circle at one window and a smaller circle beside it. I ran a finger along the page, smudged red along the edge. I swallowed and moved on. The next door opened onto an empty kitchen. Cabinets hung open, their contents gone. Only a single glass sat on the counter, half full of a cloudy liquid. I cleared my throat. "If you're here, come out with your hands where I can see them." My voice echoed in the tile like I was talking to ghosts. A low hum rose behind me, like the house was settling or breathing. I pivoted. My light skidded across the kitchen floor, catching a figure in the archway to the dining room. Too tall, hunched low, long arms brushing the floor. I called out, but the figure vanished before I could get another breath. I took a step forward. My boot slipped on a slick patch of liquid. I caught myself on the counter. The glass rattled as if someone had barely touched it. I bent down to inspect the spill, thick, rusty red. Blood. The stench hit me then, coppery, nauseating. My throat clenched. I pressed the muzzle of my gun into the countertop, careful not to disturb any prints. Protocol said secure the scene, call for backup, wait for the forensics team. But the hair on the back of my neck told me this wasn't that kind of scene. Something else was in play. I keyed my radio. Dispatch, I have potential blood evidence. Requesting medics and K9 unit. Also need a search team, code 3. No response. Static ate my words. I clenched my jaw. My radio must be blocked inside the house. I dropped to one knee, eyes scanning in every direction, fingers brushing the cold steel of my flashlight. The drop-ceiling tile in the kitchen had shifted, and I sensed movement above. My breath caught. I walked to the dining room arch and reached up to push the tile aside. It displaced easily, and I saw it, a single handprint smeared diagonally, as though someone crawled across the beam. I attempted to peer into the crawlspace, flashlight tracing beams of dust. Nothing stirred. Below, the hum turned into a soft whisper. Words I couldn't make out, but the tone was mocking, like a child's laughter distorted. I spun toward the hallway and sprinted down, adrenaline slamming through me. I passed the living room, windows still dark, and reached the basement door. It was closed, a simple latch holding it shut. I flipped it open in one motion, gun first, foot on the step, and flicked my light downward. The beam traced stairs coated in dust, footprints heading to the bottom. No breeze to stir the dust, no other light. My breath caught in my chest. I could feel the tension building like static on my skin. I hesitated. Old academy training told me never to go into unknown spaces alone, but part of me needed to see. I stepped down, counting each stair. 1, wood creaked. 2, another creak. 3, my foot brushed something soft. I froze. That whisper again, closer, like someone leaning around the corner to watch. I couldn't see them, but I knew they were there. 4, dust swirled around my boots. 5, I hit the bottom and swung the light around. The room was empty except for a folding chair in the center. On the floor, a trail of drops led from the chair toward a corner where the wall was scrawled in dark red. "It's fun to play." My pulse hammered. I raised my radio again, voice tight. Need immediate backup on Bramblewood. Basement. Possible homicide, suspect unknown. Silence. I shivered, though the basement was warm. The chair moved, a slow swivel toward me. I bent my knees, braced myself. Fairmont PD, come out now. The chair stopped. The faint scrape of wood on concrete, and then nothing. A single drop fell from the ceiling, pat-pat pattering on the worn floorboards. I took a steadying breath. My heart was a drum in my ears. I advanced one step, hand on the gun, mind racing. Another drop sounded, closer. My flashlight trembled in my grip. I leaned forward, chest tight, and spoke into the darkness. "I'm not here to hurt you. Show yourself." No answer, just that faint drip, drip, drip. I glanced to the corner where the words glowed like a menace. Something behind me shifted. My light whipped around. Nothing. Then a low creak behind the chair. I raised my gun, voice flat. Come out." Then the chair spun swiftly, facing away from me. I crept closer, boots soft on the concrete. I reached the chair, saw fresh footprints leading past it, deeper into the corner, where the floor sloped down into blackness. No steps, just a hole opening into the earth. A final drop fell, staining the floor. The whisper came again, right at my ear. "I've been waiting." My skin crawled. I backed away, hand on the wall, trying to steady the beam. The crawl space overhead creaked. I had to decide, pursue or retreat. My training screamed retreat, but my duty pressed me forward. I gripped the wall, sucked in air, and took one step toward the abyss. And the lights went out. The darkness hit me like a physical blow. One moment the bare bulb hung yellow and buzzing. The next it winked out, plunging the basement into absolute black. My breath caught in my throat. I fumbled for my flashlight, fingers brushing the cold wall, heart thundering so loud I could taste it. When I clicked the beam back on, the chair, once centered, was gone. My flashlight skittered across the floor, illuminating only empty dust motes dancing in the narrow beam. Floorboards creaked behind me, slow, deliberate. I spun toward the stairs, raised my voice. "Fairmont PD, show yourself." My words echoed hollowly. No answer, just the pulse of my own fear. The air felt thick, like breathing underwater. I held my breath, listening for any sign, a shuffle, a whisper, even the drip of that blood-like liquid. Instead, there was silence so deep it pressed into my ears. My radio lay limp on my belt, dead weight. No signal. I was cut off. Sweat beaded at my hairline. I shifted the light to my pistol hand, reminding myself it was there. I took a slow step toward where the chair had been, nothing but scuff marks in the dust. The trail of footprints continued, leading to the far corner. I forced my legs to move, each step slow, deliberate. 1. Dust swirled. 2. Wood squeaked. 3. My knee brushed something fabric-like. I knelt and ran the tip of my flashlight over a dark shape on the floor. A jacket. Police issue, but soaked through. The name tag had been cut away. I shivered. Whoever, or whatever, had been here didn't want me to recognize them. I straightened with effort, the beam sweeping upward. Above me, the ceiling pipes glinted. Water dripped in time with my heartbeat. I followed the trail of dark footprints that ended beneath a low-hanging pipe. And then I saw them. Faint scratches on the concrete wall, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. The marks curved upward, leading to a narrow crawlspace hatch I hadn't noticed before. Up there, cold air blew down, carrying the faint stench of something rotten. I swallowed. Academy training told me not to go into unlit crawlspaces alone, but this was personal now. I needed to know. I braced one boot against the wall, eased the hatch open, and aimed my flashlight into the narrow tunnel. A pair of eyes glinted back at me. A wet, yellow glare. My breath stuttered. I stepped back, gun raised. The eyes vanished. Then sudden movement. Something darted past the opening, a blur of limbs too long for a human body. It crashed into me, slamming my shoulder into the wall. I staggered, dropped the flashlight. The beam skittered across the floorboards. I heard it before I saw it. A guttural rasp, like metal scraping bone. The thing crouched in the corner, half in shadow, hunching over the hatch. Its shoulders trembled with each breath. I snatched my flashlight, swung the beam. It caught a face so pale it seemed carved from marble. Eyes sunken pools of black. Mouth stretched in a grin that wasn't human. "Get out," it hissed, voice like dry leaves. I fumbled for the radio. Nothing. I backpedaled toward the stairs, but my foot hit the jacket on the floor. I slipped, slammed my shoulder on the railing. Pain shot through me. The thing advanced one limb at a time, each step silent on the dusty boards. I scrambled upright, pistol leveled, hand shaking. "Don't come any closer," I barked, voice cracking. It cocked its head. The grin widened, revealing teeth too many, too sharp. It lifted one emaciated arm, pointed at me with a crooked finger. "You shouldn't have come alone." My training kicked in. Get distance, find cover. I sprinted for the stairs, but something wrapped around my leg, a cold, sinewy grip. I tumbled backward, revolver skidding out of reach. The thing loomed over me, its breath wet on my face. I punched blindly at its arm. My fist went through empty air, as if into smoke. I rolled, scrambled to my feet, pain burning through my calf. I limped toward the stairs, heard a rasping laugh behind me. At the top step, I sprawled into open air, chest heaving. The basement hatch slammed shut with a clang that reverberated up the stairs. I didn't look back. I scrambled out of the house, up the walkway and into the street. My flashlight lay at the gate. I stepped on it, crushing it underfoot. I ran to my cruiser, nearly dizzy with adrenaline. Hands shaking, I climbed in, slamming the door. I fumbled for the keys, started the engine and peeled away, tires chirping on asphalt. I peered in the rearview mirror. The house stood silent. The basement hatch closed, the lawn chair gone. I radioed dispatch with trembling fingers. Unit 23 to dispatch, requesting immediate backup. I've encountered an unknown subject in the basement. I'm clear, heading back. Static greeted me. I clicked the mic. Dead. It took every ounce of will to keep driving straight. My mind churned. What had I seen? A man? A twisted child? Something else? My chest ached, but I forced my hand to brush my holstered taser. Still there, unused. I pulled into the station's lot 15 minutes later, lights still flashing. Backup had arrived. 2 squads and a K-9 unit prowling the perimeter. The sergeant met me at the entrance, face grave. "Thompson, you okay?" he asked. His voice sounded distant, like coming through water. I swallowed, nodded. I need a camera operator. The L3 feed cut out in the basement. I saw something not human. He raised an eyebrow. "You sure you're okay?" "Positive," I said, voice firm. "I need to go back in, with lights, recording, multiple officers. We clear that house, we find that jacket, and we get answers." He nodded slowly. "We'll brief the team. You get checked out." As I stepped into the station, I glanced back at the empty street. The house at 47 Bramblewood Drive stood in darkness, silent once more. I didn't realize then how wrong that silence was. Because later, as I reviewed the forensics report, they found no basement hatch. No footprints, no jacket, no blood, and no indication the house had ever been occupied. No utility records, no previous 911 calls, no neighbors ever reported anyone living there. I drove past that street the next morning. No signs of a security camera, no crooked blinds, no echo of cicadas in the yard. Just another empty lot, overgrown with weeds. But I know what I saw. I remember the scrape of claws on concrete, the ember glow of those eyes, the whisper in the crawl space. And sometimes, late at night, I still wake up in a cold sweat, listening. Not for dispatch calls or distant sirens, but for the faint laughter of something waiting in the dark, ready for its next invitation. I couldn't sleep. My apartment was too quiet, the ceiling fan humming in the darkness like a distant siren. Every creak in the walls made me jerk upright, heart hammering. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the basement hatch slamming shut, the scraping claws, and that smile. Too many teeth, too wide. By dawn, I'd drunk 3 coffees, and paced the living room so much I wore a groove in the carpet. My radio sat on the kitchen counter silent. I stared at it like it might spring to life if I willed it. When my shift started, I climbed into my cruiser at 7 a.m. and headed straight for Bramblewood Drive. I needed to prove I wasn't hallucinating, that the station logs and neighbors' statements weren't wrong. When I arrived, the lot stood empty. No house number, no camera, no broken blinds. Just an overgrown patch of weeds and an old chain-link fence leaning inward. My breath caught. I pulled my cruiser to the curb and switched off the engine. I stepped out and approached the fence. The ground beneath was soft, churned by recent rain. I crouched down, flashlight in hand, and looked for footprints. There were none, only deer tracks and flattened grass. I stood and ran my hand along the fence until I found a rusted padlock hanging open from an unseen hinge. I pressed my forehead against the metal. The air was cool, damp. A knot tightened in my gut. I had dreamt every detail, or something was rewriting reality. I pulled out my camera phone and snapped pictures. The fence, the scrub, the crooked tree at the lot's edge. Then I called dispatch. 23 to base, the house is gone. Static crackled. Say again, 23. That house, they tore it down. It's just an empty lot, base. Check the records. 47 Bramblewood hasn't been demolished. I hung up. I spent the morning combing public records and GIS maps on my cruiser's laptop. County records still listed an occupied dwelling. Tax records active. Neighbors on block watch claimed no one lived there for years. They remembered a young couple moving out 5 years ago. I copied their statements into my report and filed for a formal inspection. In the meantime, I felt like I was chasing smoke. By afternoon, I was at the station debriefing Sergeant Morales. She listened, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You sure you didn't hit your head in the chase?" she asked. I squared my shoulders. "Sir, I have a 3-gun training certification and 20 years of service with no record of mental breaks." She tapped her pen. "I'm not saying you're crazy, Thompson. Something's off. We'll get a team out there, but stay sharp." Back in my car, I sank into the seat and closed my eyes. The world tilted. I remembered that whisper. "I've been waiting." It felt like a promise. My phone buzzed. New 911. Neighbor on Maple Court reporting thumps in neighbor's house basement. Police report earlier today. My chest seized. Maple Court was 2 blocks away. Identical ranch houses, identical darkened windows. The call came from Mrs. Cunningham, an elderly widow. Dispatcher patched me through. "Mrs. Cunningham, this is Officer Thompson. I'm on my way." I jammed the phone into its cradle, lights blazing as I spun the wheel toward Maple Court. My knuckles went white. My pulse drummed in my ears. I arrived at number 12, a small brick bungalow with lace curtains. Mrs. Cunningham stood at the curb wrapped in a shawl. She pointed a tremulous finger. I heard it at midnight, banging like someone fell down, then a voice, low, telling me to leave. Her eyes darted toward the dark basement window. I shone my light. The glass was smudged, streaked with dirt. No cracks, no camera. Only a single white glove stuck to the pane, as though someone pressed their hand into the glass. I descended the rickety porch steps 2 at a time and tried the front door. Locked. I wrapped my flashlight against the jamb. "Officer Thompson, Fairmont PD. Ma'am, can you open the door?" She fumbled with keys, hands shaking. The lock clicked, and the door swung open to reveal a silent foyer. Faded wallpaper peeled at the seams, and the lingering scent of mothballs made my nose wrinkle. I called backup. "Dispatch, 23 on a possible basement disturbance at 12 Maple Court. Woman reports banging and voice." Static. No reply. They were busy with multiple calls. I took a breath. I couldn't wait. I stepped inside, flashlight ahead, gun raised. Hallway pictures leered down. A young family smiling. Father, mother, 2 kids. Underneath, a newspaper clipping taped to the wall. Family disappears from Maple Court, 2008. My hand slid to my holster. The living room door was ajar. I peeked inside. Empty recliner, ashtray with 2 cigarette butts, magazines stacked on the coffee table. I followed the faint echo of dripping water down the corridor to the door marked basement. A hand-painted sign read, "Keep out." I thumbed the switch, no power. Light from my torch carved a narrow cone into the darkness. I twisted the doorknob and descended. The stairs groaned under my weight. Halfway down, I heard it. A soft humming, like a lullaby distorted by static. I stopped, listening. The humming faded, replaced by a whisper I recognized. "Be brave." My breath caught. I clutched the railing. At the bottom, the concrete floor glistened with moisture. Footprints, bare footprints, wet, led toward a closed door. It was unpainted plywood, secured with a heavy chain and padlock. I circled to the next corner. The wall was scribbled in pencil, letters chalky. "Still here." I knelt and traced the letters. The graphite smudged under my glove. I pulled out my handcuffs and, with difficulty, unlocked the padlock using one of the station's spare keys. My fingers trembled. I swung the door open. Inside was darkness so complete it swallowed my beam. I hesitated, memories of the hatch rushing back, how it had slammed the first time, trapping me inside. I took a step in. The humming resumed, louder now, harmonizing with a pounding below the floor, as though something was drumming in the crawl space. I shone my light to the ceiling where a small grate covered an opening. The grate rattled. A shape darted overhead, too quick to make out. A low moan followed. I yanked at the grate. It shifted, enough to slip my arm through. My flashlight illuminated a narrow crawl space, slick with condensation. I could feel breath on my skin. Fingers of cold climbed my arm. I clamped my hand around something slimy. I recoiled, nearly dropping the torch. Then I realized it wasn't a hand. It was a length of rope, coiled and frayed. I tugged, but it wouldn't budge. The moaning turned into laughter, soft, childlike. The grate snapped shut above me. The sudden darkness pressed in. I lashed out with my boot and the grate dented. I used my radio as bludgeon, but it shattered on the concrete. The laughter rose into a cacophony echoing off the walls. My heart seized. I braced my back against the door and kicked with all my strength. The chain slackened and the door popped open. I tumbled into the beam, gasping for air. The door swung closed behind me. I darted for the stairs, stumbling up. Behind me, the singing followed. A lullaby warped, lyrics dripping with malice. "Sleep tight, dear officer, here." I burst out of the house into the night. Mrs. Cunningham was on the porch, face pale. "Did you see it?" she whispered. I shook my head, breathing hard. My legs felt rubbery. I radioed dispatch. "Unit 23 to all units, avoid Maple Court. Potential, entity, I'm pulling back." Silence, then crackle. "Can you confirm language, 23? "I can't. Not human." I keyed off. As I drove away, the lullaby still thrummed in my ears. The streetlights blurred past, illuminating dark windows that seemed to watch me. I glanced at the rearview mirror. Behind me, in the back seat, a flash of white. A child's glove resting on the seat. I slammed on the brakes. My vision swam. I reached back. The glove lay there, untouched by me. I yanked open the rear door, empty. Only the scent of wet concrete lingered. I sank into the driver's seat and exhaled, tears stinging. My radio crackled. Unit 23, report back as soon as possible. I killed the engine. My shift wasn't over, but I couldn't move. The glove, the lullaby, the whisper. Be brave. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, the glove had reappeared on the seat, clean, pristine, its fingers curled invitingly. I stared at it. The night stretched on around me, silent and expectant. And I realized I wasn't chasing a memory or chasing down a suspect. Something was chasing me. I arrived at the station before dawn, eyes bloodshot and muscles knotted with exhaustion. Every shadow in the parking lot looked like it was watching me, waiting. I passed the roll call room and heard the low hum of fluorescent lights overhead, but it felt more oppressive than comforting. Inside, the sergeant's office light was on, bright, almost harsh. I knocked, stepped in, and saw photos pinned to the bulletin board. Old missing person flyers, press clippings, crime scene photos. My own face stared back from one flyer labeled Officer Thompson, last seen responding to domestic disturbance. I blinked twice. That wasn't me. My hand drifted to the radio on the desk. It crackled with static, then my own voice. Unit 23, please advise. No response. The sergeant looked at me over his desk. You're late, he said, flatly. I shook my head. I've been here all night. You've got the wrong tape. He frowned, reached into a drawer, pulled out a cassette labeled in neat handwriting. Bram Leewood response. Tape in, he hit play, and my own voice narrated the call from the house that didn't exist. But every detail was wrong. Wrong addresses, wrong times, wrong victims. I recognized the cadence, not the content. My heart thumped. I scrambled for the door, but the knob wouldn't turn. I heard something soft behind me, a faint rasp like metal on concrete. I whipped around, nothing but my shadow stretching across the floor. The sergeant watched me with distant eyes. You should rest, he said. You're not yourself. I swallowed hard. It's happening again. I tore out of the office, radio in hand, and sprinted down the corridor toward the armory. My boots barked on tile, echoing off lockers and turnout gear. I flung open the door and grabbed a flashlight, but it flickered. Its battery's dead. I slammed it on the rack and yanked a spare, popped it in, and stepped back out. Outside, the hallway lights stuttered and buzzed. I pointed the beam at a bulletin board jam-packed with assignment sheets. One sheet lay face down, curled at the corner. I flipped it over, typed bold. Investigation into missing patrol units. My unit should have been listed, but nothing. The overhead lights went out completely. I was swallowed by darkness. My flashlight revealed a single set of footprints leading toward the evidence locker. I followed them, feeling the smell of cold steel and mildew. When I reached the locker, I saw a figure crouched behind it, just a silhouette. I called out, adrenaline stinging my voice, "Come out with your hands up." The silhouette froze, then stood slowly, tall, crooked. It turned its head, and I saw pale skin stretched over bone, empty eye sockets. It ducked back. I raised my gun. My fingers trembled on the trigger. I opened the locker door. Inside, nothing but boxes of confiscated weapons. Printed atop one box in blood-red letters, "You will never leave." I slammed the locker shut. The latch clicked, but the sound echoed like a gunshot. I backed away, bumped into the wall, and sank to my knees. My radio crackled again. Dispatch. A voice barely recognizable as mine drifted through. 23 to dispatch. Send help. Send everyone. I collapsed against the lockers, chest heaving. The door to the hallway creaked open behind me. I turned, pointed my gun, but no one emerged. Only the dim glow of my flashlight caught in the far corner. I raised my voice, low and steady. I'm not going back there alone. Somewhere overhead, the building groaned. I stood slowly, holstering my weapon with shaking hands. My badge felt heavy against my chest. I knew I had to confront this corridor of nightmares, but I didn't trust myself to do it sober, awake, whole. I reached for my phone, no signal. Even my own precinct seemed cut off. I forced my legs to move, past the roll call room where my tape still played on loop, whispering lies that sounded like truths. I pushed through the front doors into the cold dawn air. The station lights blinked behind me, flickering like dying eyes. I didn't look back. I drove to the one place I hadn't checked, my own home. Every mile felt like a countdown. I parked in the driveway at sunrise and saw plastic crime scene tape wrapped around my porch rail. I climbed the steps, heart pounding. Property of Fairmont PD, scrawled in red across every strand. I cut through it with trembling scissors, stepped inside, and the front door slammed shut behind me on its own. My flashlight beam shifted across the foyer. Family photos lined the wall. Me, in uniform, smiling beside a woman and a little boy. But the faces were scratched out, deep gouges through the glass. A final flash of movement caught in the hallway mirror. Something crouched behind me, breathing my breath. I spun, gun raised, but the hallway was empty. I dropped to the floor, leaned against the wall, and pressed my forehead to the cool surface. My reflection stared back, eyes hollow, uniform rumpled. The thing in the station, the thing in the house, the thing in the basement, had followed me home. A whisper drifted from the darkened living room. I told you, you're next. I finally convinced myself to go back to my apartment. I needed sleep, needed to lock the whole night away, but as I climbed the creaking stairs, my service weapon heavy in its holster, a cold sweat ran down my spine. The lobby was empty at this hour, the fluorescent lights humming overhead like distant sirens. I paused at the elevator, hit 2, and watched the floor indicator flicker, stall, then blink 2 again. The doors opened onto darkness. I swallowed hard, stepped in, and the doors clanged shut. Inside the cab, the lights died, total black. My heart pounded. I rummaged for my flashlight and flicked it on. The thin beam swung wildly until I clamped it steady. Reflected in the metal walls, my face looked hollow. Eyes rimmed red. Then, for a moment, the doors snapped open on their own, and I tumbled out into the hallway of my own building. The carpet felt soft under my boots, muted my steps, but every shadow twisted into the shape of something waiting. I reached my apartment door, Unit 203, and fumbled my keys. The lock clicked, the deadbolt snapped back, but when I pushed the door, it refused to open. My shoulder slammed into it. My fist struck the wood. Behind me, I heard the soft whine of the elevator closing. I turned and caught a glimpse of movement, just a slip of gray in the reflection of the mailboxes. I spun back to my door, jiggled the knob, it swung open. I staggered inside, chest heaving. The lights were off. Moonlight spilled through the windows, casting pale rectangles on the floor. I closed the door behind me, leaned against it, sliding down until my knees hit the carpet. My flashlight's beam danced across the small living room. A couch, coffee table, stacked boxes from my last move, and the framed photo of me in uniform. I crawled forward and picked it up, dusty glass, my stiff smile. I wiped my thumb across it. A smear of red, or was it rust? I slapped the frame back on the shelf. I moved like a man in a dream, setting my keys on the table, unholstering my radio. My thumb hovered over the button, but the speaker crackled with static, a low moan beneath it. I clicked again, nothing but a scratchy echo. My own voice came back. Unit 23 to dispatch. Send backup. But overlapped with another voice, a child's whisper. Come out and play. I jerked the radio away, stared at it. I hadn't pressed the button. A soft thump in the bedroom. I swallowed and drew my flashlight, stepping toward the door. The hall was long and narrow. The walls felt too close. I called out, "It's Thompson. I'm here. If you're in here, show yourself." No answer. Only the hum of the fridge in the kitchenette beyond the living room. I edged past the couch and toward the bedroom. The door was cracked. I pushed gently. Inside, the bed was made. Too neat. A single sock lay at the foot, clean and white, identical to the gloves I'd found. I bent to pick it up. It felt warm. A weak pulse throbbed through the fabric. I jerked back, heart searing. I dropped the sock and it lay there like a hand reaching for help. Behind me, the closet door clicked shut. I spun, flashlight beam darting. The closet was empty, except for my uniform hanging inside, crisp and unworn, as though I hadn't slept in it all night. My boots stood on the floor, lace undone. I swallowed, trying to force air into tight lungs. I stepped forward, hand curling around the flashlight's handle, and reached for the closet. The closet door swung open by itself, slow and deliberate. Inside, the darkness seemed to pool. I heard breathing, shallow, ragged. I called out, "Who's there?" "Show yourself." "I'm armed." A soft giggle echoed, bouncing off the walls. My flashlight beam split the inky black. Nothing but hanging clothes, a few wire hangers clattering together. Then a shape lunged out. The sock flew from my hand as I stumbled backward. Something small, swift, pressed into my chest, knocking the breath out of me. I fell, the flashlight clattering to the floor, beam spinning crazily. I saw. It wasn't a child, not exactly. The figure crouched, limbs elongated, eyes reflecting the beam like twin moons. It hunched over, head tilting. It smiled. I fumbled for my weapon, fingers brushing the grip. I yanked it free, pointed it blindly. The figure backed up, then crouched again, as if sizing me up. In its hands was my badge. It held it aloft, thumb caressing the engraving. My name was etched there. Officer S. Thompson. The creature dropped the badge and it clattered on the hardwood like a bell. The creature tilted its head. "I've been waiting," it said, voice echoing like a distant speaker. "You invited me." My mind raced, every step of protocol, every training drill. None of it mattered against this. I rose to one knee, finger on the trigger. Heart thundered so loud I thought the walls would shake. Above me, the ceiling fan spun, casting blades of shadow across its pale face. I'd faced armed suspects, domestic disputes, armed robbery, but none of that had prepared me for something that could vanish into shadows, speak like a child, and yet smile like a monster. I swallowed, voice raw. "Why are you here?" The figure advanced, slow, dragging one foot. I pivoted on my back heel, keeping it in the beam. It paused at the threshold, breathing heavy. Then, in one fluid motion, it slipped back into the darkness, melding with the black like smoke swallowing a candle. My flashlight flickered and died. I was in total darkness again, body trembling, every muscle coiled to spring. I heard it behind me, a soft scrape on the floor coming closer. I couldn't see, but I knew it was there. I fumbled for my phone, found it, hit the flashlight icon. A harsh, white beam flared, illuminating the room. Empty. I exhaled, trying to steady myself. Then, on the wall in front of me, scrawled in what I could only imagine was blood. "Thank you for answering." The letters dripped, as though freshly painted. I stumbled backward, my light catching the sock on the floor, the open closet, the badge shining where it lay. My mind felt like it would fracture. I sank to the carpet, flashlight pointed at the writing. "You're not real," I whispered. "You can't be real." The beam caught movement behind me. I twisted, pistol raised, but nothing. When I turned back, the writing on the wall had changed. "You're next." I scrambled upright, flashlight and weapon up, but the bedroom door slammed shut in front of me. The lock clicked. Then, from the other side, that childlike whisper, "Let's play hide and seek." I aimed my light at the closed door. My own reflection flickered in the window glass across the hall, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream I couldn't hear. I realized then that no one would come. The station cameras never caught this. Dispatch never answered. It was just me, alone with something born of darkness. My hand tightened on the doorknob. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then a slow scratching from the other side, like nails trying to claw through. I backed away, pistol trembling. There was nowhere safe to run. The scratching stopped. A pause so deep it pressed my ears, then a gentle knock. One rap, 2, 3. I didn't move. The knock came again, louder. Knock, knock, knock. I looked at the shadow pool under the door. The doorknob rattled. I whispered, "Go away." Silence. Then, from the other side, a soft sing-song voice. "Tag, you're it." My world constricted to that single phrase. I raised my gun, hand shaking so hard I could barely see through the sights. A slow breath, and I pulled the trigger. The shot echoed, but the door didn't fall. Instead, the knock came again. I lowered my weapon, eyes bleeding tears. Across the room, my badge lay next to the sock. The sock twitched. My flashlight flickered and died. I was plunged into black. And then I felt it. Cold fingers on my shoulder, sliding down my arm. A voice at my ear, warm and soft. "Now you're it." I screamed. I grew up in Baltimore, but spent the last 10 years as a patrol officer in the quiet suburbs north of Columbus, Ohio. I've learned to read a neighborhood by its silence, the way lawns slope, how streetlights flicker, even the hum of distant traffic. Out here, people call 911 for spilled trash, barking dogs, or the rare domestic dispute. But every so often, something slips under the radar, an undercurrent of wrongness that can't be pinned to a single crime. This was one of those times. That afternoon began like any other. I was 3 hours into my shift, just past the lunch lull, when dispatch flagged a trespassing call on Dublin Meadows Drive, near the Franklin County line. The caller, a homeowner named Mr. Peters, reported a man screaming gibberish on his property, wandering around and rattling doorknobs. Nothing overtly violent, but enough to make anyone uneasy. I clipped my radio to my shoulder, double-checked my sidearm, and rolled toward his address in my cruiser. The sun was high, the sky a washed-out blue, and the county radio crackled with mundane chatter. A fender bender on Route 33, a shoplifting at the Kroger, nothing that screamed danger. As I turned off the main road onto a narrow, tree-lined lane, the calm of the cul-de-sac settled in. Well-kept lawns, trim hedges, two-story colonials with sail-shut shutters. Number 14 had a low ranch-style house set back behind a trimmed hedge and a single maple tree. No sign of anyone in the driveway. I flicked on my lights and rolled up the gravel path. That's when I saw them. Christmas lights, strings of red and green bulbs, still wired along the eaves and around the front windows, blinking softly even in the full glare of July. I killed the engine and listened. The lights hummed, the bulbs faded in and out, like tired eyes blinking awake. I grabbed my flashlight and holstered my radio mic. the same motions I'd practiced hundreds of times. As I stepped onto the porch, a woman appeared in the doorway. Her shoulders slumped as if the entire weight of the world rested on them. She looked to be in her mid-50s, hair pulled into a loose knot, eyes ringed with dark circles. Beside her stood a small boy, maybe 7, clutching a portable oxygen tank at his side. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. He stared at me with wide, wet eyes. I raised my hand in greeting. "Ma'am, this is Officer Hill with the Franklin County Sheriff's Office. I got a trespass complaint, someone yelling on your property. Didn't see anyone else out here." The woman dragged a trembling hand over her face. I'm taking care of him," she said, nodding toward the boy. "My name's Clara Reynolds. He's my nephew. His mom's in treatment and his father, well, he's off on another binge. Came back this morning, demanded I hand him over. I called when he started threatening to break in." I crouched to meet the boy's gaze. "Hey there, everything okay?" He pressed the oxygen mask tighter against his face. "She's afraid," he muttered. I tried to help. For a moment, I saw nothing but concern in his eyes. The boy's situation checked out. He had an inhaler clipped to his belt, a spare tank on the porch bench, and a medicine schedule taped to the door frame. No signs of neglect. I straightened and faced Clara. "Sir's not here now, so I can't do much on trespass. You have my direct line. If he comes back, call me immediately. Maybe think about a doorbell camera or security system. Evidence, it's better than hand-to-hand disputes." She nodded, voice barely a whisper. "Thank you, officer." Her words sounded hollow, as if spoken through cotton. I watched them head back inside and climbed into my cruiser. On the notebook pad I scribbled, "Clara R., nephew, meth relapse father, no camera, uneasy feeling." I left the lights flashing for a moment, then turned them off and drove back toward dispatch. The delay was negligible, but the image of those blinking bulbs stayed with me. Festive out of season. A ghostly echo in bright daylight. 2 days later, another officer radioed about a call to the same address. Clara's name came up over the net. Reports of increasing agitation. Someone hearing her shout at empty corners. The boy's oxygen tank was being wheeled behind her like a second shadow. I half expected to hear of drug use or domestic abuse, but her medical supplies and food stores were in order, her home well kept for a single caretaker. Still, the reports grew stranger. Furniture moved in the night, footsteps in the attic, lights that blinked beyond the ones on the eaves. By the time I got the third call, I was at the station running paperwork. Dispatch patch brought through a frightening snippet. A child's sobbing voice, begging for help, telling them Aunt Clara was scary and might hurt me. My heart twisted in my chest. I threw on my jacket and hopped into my cruiser before even grabbing my radio. Ramirez, my partner, flagged me as I pulled out, eyes wide. "Another one down there?" I didn't answer. I floored the gas, weaving through the grid of side streets. Julia Street, Maplewood Drive, then back onto Dublin Meadows. The sun had dipped low. Shadows stretched unnaturally long across the pavement. When I turned onto that narrow lane, the Christmas lights still glowed. Tiny beacons that no longer felt whimsical. The air was thick, humid, and every nerve flared like strobes in a dark room. We skidded to the curb. Ramirez and I jumped out. My radio hit the ground with a dull thunk. The boy was on the porch, mask soaked, tears trailing down his cheeks. Clara stood behind him, rocking, eyes darting as if watching something only she could perceive. She clutched a handful of old Polaroids, little snapshots of the boy, of her brother who had left, of the house in winter. Her lips moved in rapid murmurs. strings of names and dates I couldn't catch. I spoke calmly, my voice steady. "Ma'am, let's step aside. We need to make sure everyone's safe." She turned, and her eyes met mine with a spark of recognition and something else, a flash of desperation that made me step back. Her jaw clenched. "You can't take him," she hissed. "He's mine. He promised me." The boy whimpered. Ramirez reached out. "Sir, I mean Miss Reynolds, we're here to help." He squared his shoulders, but I saw the doubt flicker in his eyes too. She shrieked then, small and sharp, and hurled the Polaroids to the porch floor. The pictures fluttered across the boards, faces smiling back at me from past summers. She lunged forward, hands flailing. I ducked instinctively, hearing the boy scream. Ramirez was at her side in a flash, cuffing her gently, but she fought like a wild animal, eyes glazed, murmuring about shadows moving in the walls. We had no choice but to call it a 5150 hold, a mental health emergency. As they rolled her onto a stretcher, her head lolled back, tears mingling with spit at her lips. She looked at me, voice cracking. "They'll come back." I knelt beside the boy, taking his hand. "You're safe now, buddy. We've got you." They led her away. Ramirez closed the front gate. I stood in the silent yard, the breeze, stirring the hanging bulbs. I felt a hollow ache behind my eyes, not anger, not relief, but something closer to grief. The boy clutched my uniform sleeve and whispered, "Thank you, officer." I crouched and looked at him. "You did good, kid." As I stood, I noticed something. The air felt wrong. My head swam, a dull throb at my temples. Ramirez nearby gripped his forehead. "You okay?" I asked. He shook his head, voice distant. "Lightheaded." I rubbed my eyes, breathing deep. The dizzy spell faded in seconds, but I remembered the flicker of those bulbs, the way they hummed. Something in my gut told me to check the furnace room, to trust the tremor in my bones. I glanced at the front door, the frame dented by Clara's panic-stricken fingers. I reached for my radio. The line was quiet. A knot formed in my chest. I stepped onto the porch, every sense alert. Inside, the house was still, waiting. I stepped across the threshold and the air hit me like a wave. Stale, heavy, impossible to place. It was as if every breath I drew was laced with faint rust and damp plaster. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom. Family photos lined the wall, smiling faces whose eyes seemed to track me, and beneath them a narrow hallway stretched toward the back of the house. The humming of those Christmas lights outside had vanished. Inside, there was only silence so thick it pressed against my eardrums. "Ramirez," I whispered into my radio. "I'm inside. You good?" My voice sounded brittle even to my own ears. A few seconds of static followed, then his reply. "I'm outside still, catching my breath." "That breeze by the furnace room, man. It was cold, like the fall got trapped in here." I nodded, although he couldn't see me. "I'll check the furnace. You secure the perimeter and watch the front door." I clicked off the mic. Procedure. Stay on task. Each footstep raised a soft creak. The hallway walls were painted an institutional beige, scuffed at kid height by little sneakers. Faded scribbles, perhaps a growth chart, had been erased halfway up, as if someone scraped it away in a rush. The boy's presence felt woven into every crack and stain, his oxygen tank's soft hiss as he adjusted the flow, the uneven gape of his sneakers on the welcome mat. A mother's devotion, twisted by something intangible. I followed the corridor, flashlight in my left hand, service weapon at low port in my right. Doors lined the hall. One opened onto a small sitting room, leather armchair tipped on its side. Another led to a tiled bathroom with an open cabinet and medicine bottles spilled across the sink. Inside the cabinet, along with inhalers and kids' vitamins, lay a folded photograph of Clara and the boy, taken at some distant carnival. Cotton candy smiles against a backdrop of lights that now felt ominous. My throat tightened. I slipped the photo back into the cabinet. The wood was warped, mildew curling in the seams. I backed out of the bathroom and advanced 2 doors down, toward a narrow door marked Utility. The air grew cooler, and I half expected to see condensation on the concrete floor. The handle was cold, almost slick under my glove. I twisted it and edged inside. Furnace parts loomed in half-light. Coils, pipes, an ancient gas meter stamped with date codes from the 1980s. A low hissing came from somewhere near the back wall, too rhythmic to be random. I knelt, sweeping the beam across the base of the furnace. Tiny flecks of rust and a wafer-thin crack along the combustion chamber's seam. A stale, oily smell undercut the silence. Carbon monoxide has no odor, but this felt like a warning. "Ramirez," I keyed my mic. "Got a leak, possible CO. I need you here now." Static. For a moment, nothing. Then a crackle. "I'm on the porch. Something. This house. It's messing with me." I swallowed. "Ramirez, come down. Stay calm." I forced the words out, even though my own voice wavered. I stood and backed out, closing the door on the hiss, but its echo lingered behind me. The hallway seemed narrower now, the ceiling lower. I stumbled into the living room, where the air was even colder, like the house had emptied itself of heat. The cushions on the sofa were sunken, and in the fireplace lay a scattering of Christmas lights. Those same red and green bulbs, tangled among ash and sooty logs. They were off, but the charred wires still smelled of burnt plastic. Something in my chest tightened. My head felt light, a soft ache blooming behind my eyes. I blinked, sweeping the beam across the room. A corner of the rug curled, as though someone, no, something, had moved it. I crouched, running a gloved finger along the edge, dust, then fresh scratch marks, gouged into the wood floor beneath. They pointed away toward the staircase descending into the basement. I hesitated. Basements freaked me out more than any wooded field. Damp, dark, full of things you can't see until they're on top of you. But the leak had to be contained. I clicked on my mic again. "Ramirez, basement, now." "No, man," he said, voice thin. "I can't. Something's wrong. I think I saw her. Clara. She was there." My spine stiffened. "Focus. You secure the front. I'm going down." I dropped into the stairwell. Wooden steps sagged under my weight. Each one groaned, nails creaking. My flashlight bounced crazily across the concrete walls, revealing peeling paint and damp patches. I counted steps, 6, 7, 8, until I reached a landing. The low ceiling forced me to lean forward. In the far corner, sealed behind a chain, stood the water heater. Rusted, its pressure relief valve oozing a thin trickle of brownish liquid. A fine mist hovered around it, like breath vapor in a freezer. I raised the beam. The prototype gas line ran straight into the heater's base, the joint wrapped in decades-old tape. A coral-colored stain smeared the concrete beneath. I knelt to examine it closer. My head throbbed. Each pulse felt synchronized with the imperceptible hiss of escaping gas. I touched the valve housing. It was warm, just a few degrees above ambient, enough to create a slow flood of invisible poison. I turned to leave, intending to call hazmat, but then I heard it. A soft click, like a door swinging shut upstairs. I spun toward the darkness at the top of the stairs. The beam revealed only floating dust motes suspended in the yellow circle of light. My breath caught. I pressed my back against the wall and called, "Ramirez? You there?" The radio crackled weakly. "I'm here." he rasped. I thought, footsteps. I heard it too, I said, voice low. Stay where you are. I'll patch hazmat. My fingers trembled as I dialed dispatch. This is Officer Hill. I need hazmat at 14 Dublin Meadows. Possible carbon monoxide leak, heavy stagnation indoors, 2 miners present. My own words echoed in my ears. Alien. I ended the call and looked up. The basement was silent again, too quiet. I stood and climbed back toward the living room. Each step felt leaden. My lungs burned with effort. The hallway at the top was narrower still. Doors seemed closer together, pressing in. I reached for the doorknob of the sitting room, intended as a shortcut back to the porch. But the handle was ice cold, and when I twisted it, the door refused to budge. The wood grain was swollen, edges swollen tight around the jamb. I tugged again. A single crack snapped somewhere above me. My ears sang. I pivoted and headed toward the front door, but the hallway stretched impossibly long. The beige walls faded to a dirty gray. I passed the bathroom again, but now the mirror was shattered. Silver shards littered the sink. A sharp pain stabbed my foot. One of the photos I'd returned was flaked off its backing and lay beneath the threshold. I flinched away, breathing ragged. My radio sputtered. "Officer Hill, what's your status?" The dispatcher's voice was distant, muffled as though underwater. I pressed the mic. Basement leak verified. Clara and the boy, they're gone." "Say again," came the reply. I blinked. Clara had been taken away by ambulance. How could she be gone? The boy was in foster care. A silence. Then, through static, a child's sob. "Help me," it whispered, echoing off unseen walls. My blood ran cold. I dropped to one knee, heart hammering. The sob was followed by a giggle, a child's giggle brittle as ice. Lightheaded, I clutched the wall. My flashlight beam wavered. The edges of the hallway flickered black. A second spark, and the beam died. Darkness swallowed me whole. "Ramirez," I rasped, crawling forward. "Ramirez, can you hear me?" No answer. My head pounded. I tasted copper. My knee pressed against something damp. I lifted my hand, warm and sticky. I flicked the beam back on. Before me, smeared on the wall, was the boy's small handprint, deep red against the plaster, so fresh it glistened. I bolted upright, stumbling backward. My radio fell from my belt, skidding across the floor. It landed near the photo scraps. I reached for it, vision swimming, lungs gulping air that burned. When I grabbed the mic, it screeched in protest, then cleared. "We have an officer down," the dispatcher blared. "All units converge. Possible missing officer." My gloved hand flew to my chest, still breathing. I took a shaky step toward the front. But the hallway behind me stretched into shadow, growing darker, longer. I turned the beam back on the smeared handprint. The shape blurred, almost pulsed. I staggered forward, desperate for sunlight, for the cool evening air. My world lurched as if the house had tilted. I closed my eyes for a moment. When I opened them, I was at the threshold of the living room. The sofa tipped over, the Christmas lights dead, the fireplace full of ash. The front door stood open, street lamp light pooling on the floorboards. I exhaled, relief flooding me, and stepped toward freedom. But as my boot touched the threshold, a small voice whispered from behind, "Don't go." My blood froze. I spun, breath caught in my throat. The hallway was silent. I strained against the pounding in my ears. The front door loomed open, my only escape. In that moment, I realized I was utterly alone, inside a house that didn't want me to leave. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with unseen eyes. My radio lay at my feet, its speaker emitting a faint, static-laced hum. Behind me, the darkness shifted. just enough for me to glimpse a small figure disappearing around the corner. I swallowed against the dry ache in my throat. The front door beckoned, but the warning in that voice, colder than any winter night, held me rooted. I looked down the hall one last time, the beam of my flashlight slicing through the gloom, searching for the boy, for Clara, for anything that explained the impossible. All I saw were the walls, scuffed and whispering. I stepped back into the dark. The door closed behind me with a soft click. The lights flickered once, twice, and then everything whispered back in echoes. Don't go. The walls pressed in around me as I stepped back into the dark. My flashlight rattled in my grip, its beam slicing through the stale air, revealing nothing but shadows that clung to every corner. The front door had shut itself, though I hadn't heard a click this time, more like a sigh running through the wood. My radio lay at my feet, the speaker crackling with distant static and a child's voice muttering, "Find me." I forced myself to breathe, each inhale a struggle against the thick, cold air. I kicked the radio out of the way and turned toward the hallway. The beige paint had peeled away in long strips, like skin sloughing off a body. I half expected to step on pieces of it, but the floor was clear, too clear. The rug I'd seen before was gone. In its place, polished hardwood stretched away toward darkness. The familiar corridor felt alien, lengthened and crooked, the doors misaligned in their frames. I clicked my heels together. Procedure first. I took 3 steady steps, then 4. My breath pounded in my ears as I moved, flashlight trained at eye level, scanning door handles, door frames, picture hooks, anything that clued me in on where I was. At the far end, the narrow stairs I'd come down earlier were gone. Instead, a single door with a tarnished brass knob waited like a silent sentinel. My hand hovered inches from the knob. I could feel the cool metal through my glove. The urge to turn it was overwhelming, like the house itself was begging me to enter, promising answers. But something deeper in my gut warned against it. Fear had driven me this far. Curiosity might kill me. A soft cry sounded behind the door. High-pitched, tremulous, unmistakable, the boy's voice. "Officer," it whispered, fading like an echo. My pulse jumped. That cry couldn't be real. He'd been taken into foster care hours ago. Yet here it was, as clear as the scream of my own blood inside my veins. I twisted the knob. It resisted, then gave way with a groan that trailed into silence. Inside, light flickered. A single bare bulb swayed overhead, casting stuttering shadows. The room was small, barely more than a closet. Bare concrete walls, a low ceiling, the smell of damp earth. In the center lay a child's blanket, folded into a perfect square, its edges pinched tight. No boy, no box, nothing but that blanket. My throat tightened. I swallowed. The beam drifted to the floor. Footprints, small and wet, imprinted in dust, leading toward the back wall. I followed them step by step until I reached the far corner. The flashlight revealed scratched words gouged into the concrete. "Help me," scrawled in uneven capitals. Beneath it, an arrow pointed down. I knelt, shining the light on a loose seam between 2 slabs of concrete. My fingers pried at it. Cold, damp, sticky. Beneath the slab was a narrow cavity, just wide enough for a small hand. The scratch marks matched the depth of a child's fingers. My stomach clenched. Was this where they'd kept him? Where Clara had gone mad trying to protect him? A sudden gust of air slammed into my face, pushing me back. The door swung shut behind me, plunging the room into deeper darkness. My flashlight flickered. I jabbed at it, and it steadied. In that flash of light, I saw them. 2 outlines pressed against the wall, one tall and thin, the other short with a hunched back. They stood unmoving, faces hidden in shadow. "Don't leave me," the taller one whispered. The voice was raspy, as if coming through water. I scrambled backward, chest heaving. My hand hit the door, but it was stuck. I slammed my shoulder against it. Wood splintered, but the knob held strong. Panic rose. I spun on my heel and launched myself at the fusion seam again, ripping the slab free, and lunged headfirst into the next space. I landed hard on my right knee. The gap opened into a narrow tunnel, 4 feet wide and barely 6 feet tall, lit by the faint glow of the Christmas lights tangled overhead. The bulbs winked like dying stars. I crawled forward, the walls slick with condensation. Each inch closer felt like wading through thick oil. My ear pressed to the ground. Faint sobs echoed from somewhere deeper. I paused. The tunnel forked in 2 directions. To the left, cold wind carried the stench of mildew and rust. To the right, a softer current, tinged with antiseptic. I thought of the boy's oxygen tubing, the hospital bed, Clara's terrified eyes. I pressed right. The tunnel sloped upward. The ground beneath my palms shifted from concrete to carpet, thin industrial gray, damp at the edges. I rose to my feet, flicking dust from my pants. I was in a hallway again, sterile walls lined with metal lockers and bright fluorescent lights, one of which buzzed and flickered. It felt nothing like the house I'd entered. A faded sign read, "Pediatrics Wing, Children's Care Unit." My heart hammered. This wasn't possible. The school nurse had closed years ago. How could a suburban home hold a hospital corridor? I pushed on, passing room numbers scratched into the paint. 0123, 0124, 0125. The doors all ajar, dark interiors swallowing the light. I heard a door slam behind me. I whirled around. The corridor stretched back the way I'd come, but now the ceiling arch climbed higher, the walls curving inward like a barrel. The lockers were gone, replaced by cots draped in white sheets, each one occupied by a small form curled up and still. The forms were blurred, indistinct, like memories half erased. I realized with a sick twist that these were children, ghosts of children. My stomach lurched. I pressed on, each step echoing in the corridor. At the end was a nurse's station, the desk stacked with old paper charts and a rotary phone. On the phone's cradle sat a single Polaroid, the boy, sitting upright in a chair, staring directly at the camera with unblinking eyes. Behind him, on the wall, the same Christmas lights hung askew, their wires trailing like veins. I picked up the photo. His eyes, they seemed to move, tracking me. I flipped it over. A message scrawled in black ink, too neat for a child. "Stay with me." My hands shook so badly the photo slipped through my fingers and fluttered to the floor. Then a voice called, soft and childlike, "I miss you." It came from the locker nearest me. I turned, and the door swung open, revealing an empty gown hanging inside. A small, dirty handprint smeared the metal. The lock clicked shut behind me. I yanked at the handle. It wouldn't budge. Behind me, the corridor began to twist and pulse as if alive, walls breathing, ceiling rising and falling. The lights flickered faster, then all went out. In the pitch black, the whisper came again. "Officer, come find me." I pounded on the door, the frame rattling. Sweat stung my eyes. My radio was out of reach in the other room. I was trapped. The whisper turned to sobbing, then laughter, brittle and distant. My mind raced. This was no longer carbon monoxide, no longer mental breakdown. This house had warped reality itself, drawn me into a maze built on fear. A single bulb blinked back on, swinging overhead. In its light, I saw footprints. Mine, walking toward the far wall, then back toward me, then away again, already worn by someone. But there was only one person here. I sank to my knees, chest heaving. I wanted to scream, to call out, but my voice failed. I realized then that I had no idea where I was or how deep I'd gone. There was no map, no logic, only the incessant beckoning of those voices, guiding me further from the exit. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for the outside world. Nothing but silence pressed back. The laughter grew louder, echoing through the walls. I pressed my face to the metal as close as I dared. "I'm here," I whispered. "I'll find you." The whisper came again, so close I felt the breath on my cheek. "Come home." I collapsed backward as the door slowly creaked open, no handle turning, just the wood shifting of its own accord. Beyond, the corridor had changed again, papered in peeling floral wallpaper, lit by a single lamp on a wooden table. On the table lay a recorder, my own recorder, still playing the dispatch channel. I crawled forward, picked it up, and hit stop. The speaker crackled, then clear. "Officer Hill, are you okay?" It was Ramirez's voice, frantic. I pressed to transmit. I'm here," I stammered. "I found something." My words trailed off as the corridor warped once more, the walls bending inward, the lamp's light chasing the shadows. A soft sob sounded from the next room. I stood, the recorder heavy in my hand. I shined my flashlight down the new hallway and saw the boy's silhouette at the far end, back turned. He wore hospital pajamas, oxygen tubing still attached. His shoulders shook as he rocked. I heard Clara's voice join him, quiet and urgent. "We belong here." The hallway stretched impossibly long. The boy began to walk away, slow and deliberate, arms outstretched. I moved after him. Each step made the air colder, the light dimmer. My recorder crackled. "Officer Hill, hold on." Then silence. I stumbled forward, my breath fogging in my path. The boy's figure dissolved into the darkness. The corridor ended at a blank wall, smooth and unmarked. In the center, a door shaped like an embryo, curved and uninviting. No knob, just a seam in the wall. The recorder slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. A whisper grew from the wall itself. "Open it." My hand reached out, trembling, toward the seam. I felt the throb in my temples, the burn in my lungs, the pull in my gut. At that moment, every rule I lived by, the badge, the promise to protect, collapsed under the weight of my own fear and desperation. I slid my fingers into the crack. The wall pulsed under my touch. Behind it, I could feel two heartbeats, one small and frantic, one ragged and slow. I hesitated, every instinct screaming to run, but I couldn't leave them, not after coming this far. With a single push, the wall gave way. Darkness swallowed me again, and I stepped inside. The door closed behind me, sealing me in. The last light flickered out. Silence. And then, from somewhere beyond the void, a faint whisper. "Welcome home, officer."